Chapter 410. Go to watch net. In Zhao Yogan's opinion, Li Yundong was just a poor student who had raised some money to open such a shop. As long as he casually played with him, it wouldn't take long for this annoying boy to collapse and go bankrupt. Zhao Yuzhen was afraid that Li Yundong would break down and go bankrupt. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. It was out of this mentality that the waiters Zhao Yuzhen hired were all beautiful women with high salaries that made people envious. At first, these beauties in Cheongsam thought that they had met a generous boss, especially when the opening ceremony had been very lively and glorious. Just now, the tea house of Zhao had been full of friends and it had been very lively. The mayor had also come in person. Naturally, they felt honored and proud, so they walked with their heads held high. But for some reason, after their boss ran over to the other side and threw some harsh words at them, the whole situation changed. Their side, which was full of friends, suddenly became deserted, and the other side, which was deserted, suddenly became a boiling cauldron of voices. This was the ups and downs of life. The beauties in Cheongsam felt that their shop had been robbed of the limelight by the other side, which was already very embarrassing and depressing. There was probably nothing more embarrassing and depressing in life than being suppressed by the other side. But soon something even more depressing happened. The other side actually came to their shop to move tables and chairs, as if they were moving their own things. This was equivalent to a prostitute being prostituted. Not only did the customer not pay, but he also robbed the prostitute. This was 2F** king ridiculous. But soon, the beauties in Cheongsam found that the most embarrassing thing was not that they were robbed after being prostituted, but that their boss was kneeling on the street and crying loudly. At this time, the beauties in Cheongsam almost broke down. Some of them even whispered in private, "Is the opposite side still hiring waiters? I want to go there." "Me too. It's so embarrassing to stay here. The boss opposite is young and handsome, and he has such a strong background. Alas, I'm willing to pay for it." "Pay for it? Wake up, look at how many beauties there are around him. You won't get your turn even if you queue for 100 years. These beauties in Cheongsams were secretly pointing at Zhao Yuzhen behind him. Li Yundong and the others on the opposite side were also looking at Zhao Yuzhen and whispering. Li Yunyang looked at Zhao Yuzhen and suddenly frowned. He said in a low voice, "Have we gone too far? Too much?" Feng Na snorted. This kind of people bully others when they're in power, and pretend to be pitiful when they're out of power. If you ask me, it's not too much at all. All I did was move 2 tables and chairs. If it were me, I would empty his shop, then tear down his building. Her sidekick, Ching Ching, nodded vigorously. Yes. Good idea. Li Yundong smiled and said, "You two guys are really enjoying the show?" Ziyuan also smiled and said, "Yes, this guy is finished. There's no need to deal with him anymore. Aren't you afraid of lowering your own status? Moreover, where it is possible to let people off, one should forgive and forget." At this time, Zhou Qin and Su Chan, who had put down the table and chairs, also came over. The little girl clapped her hands and snorted. "Are you going to let him go just like that? He got off lightly. This guy has been going against us for more than 10 days. A smile appeared at the corner of Zhou Qin's mouth. "It doesn't matter. There will be plenty of opportunities to deal with him in the future. It's good to let him play with him slowly." Li Yundong looked at her helplessly and said, "Is this your true colors?" Zhou Qin smiled slightly, lifted her long black hair, and said lightly, "I just want some people to know that whoever wants to bully us must pay the price. Master, if it's not convenient for you to do something, then let me do it." Li Yundong shook his head with a wry smile. He opened his mouth and was about to speak when Feng Na, who was beside him, persuaded, "Oh, hurry up and let President Chao and the others sit down. They've been waiting for a long time." Only then did Li Yundong find that Chao Kefi, Yin Meng Fan, and Lu Feier were looking at them in shock. Li Yundong quickly smiled and said, "President Chao, you can sit anywhere you want." As he spoke, Li Yundong pointed to the tables and chairs that Zhou Qin and Su Chan had brought back and said with a smile, "Would you like to sit here?" Chao Kefi quickly waved her hand and said with a smile, No, these are your trophies. We can't sit here." She pulled Lu Feier and Yin Meng Fan to a table next to them and sat down. Li Yundong smiled and didn't insist. After a while, the upper and lower floors were full of people. Ziyuan whispered to Li Yundong, "Can we start the opening ceremony?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay." Zhou Qin also said, "Then let's invite Uncle Li to cut the ribbon for us." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Did we prepare for this?" Zhou Qin also smiled and said, "It's temporary. It just so happens that there are red silk and satin in the store that hasn't been used up yet. We can make do with it temporarily." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said to Su Chan, Chaner, you will be the MC. You will be responsible for carrying the plates later. Su Chan blinked her eyes. Carrying what plates? Li Yundong smiled and scratched the tip of her nose. Nonsense, didn't you see how they did it at the beginning? Can't you do the same? Su Chan suddenly understood. She giggled and said, I see, then I will go and prepare. Li Yundong patted her head intimately and said, Don't make any mistakes. Su Chan answered obediently, I know. After that, she turned around and ran into the storage room of the tea house. Li Yundong then said to Zhou Qin, You Feng Na and Qing Qing go and prepare the red silk. I will invite Secretary Li down later. Zhou Qin nodded to Feng Na and Qing Qing, then turned around and left. Li Yundong smiled and said to the other students who had accompanied Qing Qing, Everyone take your seats. Don't stand at the door with me. If you don't know better, you will think that you are my bodyguards. The students of Tiannan University laughed and sat down on the first floor one after another. After Li Yundong made arrangements, he whispered to Ziyuan, Will you cut the ribbon with me later? Ziyuan asked curiously, Why did you suddenly make such an arrangement? Li Yundong smiled and said, If it weren't for you, this tea house wouldn't have been able to open at all. According to the shares, you have at least 35% of the shares, I also have 35%, and the others will share the remaining 30%. She shook her head and refused, saying, Li Yundong, since you also know that this 100% is a whole, then you shouldn't say such a thing. If any one of them is missing, it will be incomplete. Think about it, when we are competing with others in the tea art competition, will it be okay without Su Chan? Will it be okay without Hongling? If I am the only one cutting the ribbon, they will have their own thoughts even if they don't say it. Li Yundong was silent for a long time. He sighed softly and said, Ziyuan, it's just that it's difficult for you. Ziyuan smiled faintly. How can it be difficult? That's not what I want. What's more, you are the only man among us. It's naturally best for you to come forward on such an occasion. Li Yundong smiled and nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Su Chan suddenly rushed out of the storage room and shouted, Yundong, we only have a pair of scissors. Li Yundong was stunned. Just a pair of scissors? I'm afraid it's not enough, right? Is it too late to buy it now? Su Chan blinked her eyes. I don't think it's too late. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, Find something else to replace it with. A living person can't be suffocated to death by peeing. Su Chan nodded and turned to leave. At this time, Zhou Qin, Feng Na, and the others also took out a red ribbon that was more than 3 meters long. Zhou Qin asked, Is this long enough? Li Yundong nodded and said, It's enough. Zhou Qin, go and ask Secretary Li to come down. Let's start cutting the ribbon. Li Yundong said to the little foxes, You guys are responsible for setting off the firecrackers. When the little foxes heard this, they were immediately overjoyed. They ran to the storage room and pulled out a few bundles of firecrackers. Li Yundong said to them, Hang them on the roof. Setting off the firecrackers later will be a good sign for good luck. The little foxes all had bright eyes and white teeth, and each of them had bright and kind eyes. Wherever they looked, the souls of men would almost be hooked out of their bodies. They responded in unison, immediately attracting the attention of many people upstairs. They saw 4 young girls each holding a string of firecrackers in their hands. They didn't seem to make any movements, but their figures leaped to the top of the building. After hanging the firecrackers, they landed lightly like swallows. This time the guests upstairs were dumbfounded. After a while, they let out an earth-shattering cheer, and their palms turned red from clapping. Lu Feier, who was downstairs, widened her eyes and exclaimed, Amazing! How can they jump so high? Are they hanging wires? Chow Kefi pursed her lips and said with a smile, Where can we hang wires from? Do you think this is a movie? This is real skill. Lu Feier shook her head in disbelief and said, How is that possible? They look younger than me. How could they jump so high? If they could really jump so high, they would have broken several Olympic records. Chow Kefi smiled meaningfully. I didn't believe it before, but since I met Li Yundong, I believe that there are masters in this world. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong's figure and said suspiciously, Is he that high? He doesn't look like a master. At this time, Zhou Qin had invited Li Yuanbo down to cut the ribbon for the opening ceremony of Desangxian. As the owner, Li Yundong stood side by side with Li Yuanbo. Li Yuanbo had been silently observing Li Yundong. He saw that no matter who he met on such a big occasion, Li Yundong's expression didn't change. He was neither servile nor overbearing, and his every move revealed a dignified bearing. His calmness not only surpassed that of his peers, but even many old politicians who were used to great storms were inferior to him. He was secretly surprised and sighed, how did this young man cultivate such a bearing? Amazing, amazing. At this time, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and Feng Na temporarily played the role of ceremonial ladies, holding the red silk on both sides and standing gracefully. When Li Yuanbo saw that the three of them were wearing different clothes, he was immediately amused. He said with a smile, "Are you temporary guests? You're not professional." Ziyuan smiled slightly, like a breeze caressing her face. Feng Na was a little nervous. How could she dare to answer the words of the secretary of the provincial party committee? Only Zhou Qin said with a smile, "Uncle Li, the decoration workers are professional enough, right? But their decoration is not as good as ours. These days it's about being specialized in many things." Li Yuanbo pointed at Zhou Qin and said with a smile, "Little girl, you have a sharp tongue." Then he said to Li Yundong with a smile, "Xiao Li, you want me to cut the ribbon, but where are the scissors?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "I'll be right there." Then he turned his head and shouted into the storage room, "Su Chan, have you found it?" I'm coming, I'm coming." Before Su Chan appeared, her voice floated out from inside. Not long after, she hurried out with a plate covered with 2 pieces of red cloth. Li Yuanbo saw that Su Chan was beautiful and charming, especially when she was in a hurry. He couldn't help laughing and said, "What a beautiful girl. Don't worry, don't fall." Su Chan glanced at Li Yuanbo and smiled. She raised the plate and said, "Secretary Li, please remove the red silk cloth on the right." Li Yuanbo saw that there were 2 pieces of red cloth on the plate. He smiled and said, "Oh, what custom is this?" As he said this, he lifted the red silk cloth and saw a pair of scissors lying inside. He picked it up with a smile. Su Chan brought the plate back to Li Yundong and kept winking at him. Li Yundong felt strange when he saw Su Chan's strange behavior, so he asked in a low voice, "Chaner, what's wrong with you?" Su Chan opened her mouth and was about to speak when she saw Li Yuanbo looking at Li Yundong in confusion. He asked, "Xiao Li, why don't you take off the cloth?" Su Chan immediately shut her mouth, stared at the red cloth and kept winking at Li Yundong. Li Yundong saw the little girl's behavior and thought that she wanted him to remove the red cloth quickly, so he removed it without saying a word. Once it was removed, it would be terrible. Su Chan suddenly lowered her head with a painful expression, while Li Yundong was dumbfounded and his eyes were wide open. He saw a file lying quietly on the plate. Li Yuanbo, who was standing to one side, saw Li Yundong in a daze. He glanced at him curiously and was immediately stunned. The secretary of the provincial party committee, who had experienced countless storms and seen countless big scenes, was stunned on the spot and couldn't say a word. Li Yundong picked up the 7-inch-long file from the plate with trembling hands and stammered, What is this?" Su Chan lowered her head, and her chin almost touched her chest. She said in a muffled voice, File? Li Yundong looked like he was going crazy. "Didn't I ask you to find a replacement? Even a knife would do. What did you find? Can this be used to cut the ribbon?" Su Chan looked up at Li Yundong and muttered in a low voice, "A file is also a knife." Li Yundong almost broke down. He said, "A file is also a knife? Is a kumquat also an orange? Is a wangzai steamed bun also a steamed bun?" Vote recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 411. Go to watch next. Zhou Qin, Ziyuan, and Feng Na, who were serving as the etiquette girls, were embarrassed and wanted to laugh at the same time. Go to watch net. 7 However, they didn't dare to laugh at the scene in front of them, so they had to force themselves to hold it in. All of them looked straight ahead, gritted their teeth and tightened their faces with bitter and hateful expressions. Li Yundong's classic joke about files and kumquats suddenly made Zhou Qin and Feng Na burst out laughing at the same time, but they quickly held it back. Their faces were tense and the corners of their mouths twitched. Only Ziyuan was the calmest. She looked up at the sky with a calm face, but only Ruan Hongling, who was the most familiar with her, noticed that Ziyuan's hand was holding the silk quite hard, and her shoulders were shaking slightly as if she couldn't help laughing. Li Yundong's shout made the girl lower her head. She looked aggrieved and whispered, "I can't find anything else to replace it. Who told you to rush me?" Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. Well, now it was his fault. Li Yuanbo also tried to hold back his laughter and said, "Xiao Li, what's the problem?" Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, Secretary Li, it's nothing. Let's cut the ribbon as usual. Li Yuanbo pointed to the file in Li Yundong's hand and laughed. I've cut ribbons many times, but this is the first time I've seen someone cut the ribbon with such a thing. Creative. When Li Yundong heard this, he suddenly had an idea. He smiled and said, Secretary Li, do you mind if I show you a little trick? Li Yuanbo asked curiously, a little trick? Xiao Li, you can do tricks? Li Yundong smiled and said, of course, a little trick can't enter your eyes. It's just to make you smile. Li Yunbo laughed and said, then let's see what kind of trick it is. Li Yundong raised the file in his hand and handed it to Li Yuanbo. Secretary Li, take a look. Is this a file? Li Yuanbo immediately laughed. No need to look. It's a file. Li Yundong smiled and said, since it is a file, do you think it can cut this silk? No. Li Yuanbo laughed. Li Yundong nodded. Since Mr. Li thinks that it's just a file and can't cut this silk, what do you guys think? With that, he raised the file high in the air and showed it to the people upstairs and downstairs. At this time, the people upstairs and downstairs were looking at him. Someone shouted, it's file, we saw it clearly. Lu Fair also whispered to Chow Kefi, Sister Chow, what's wrong with this guy? What are you trying to do with that file? Chow Kefi gently slapped her hand and stared at Li Yundong. She said in a low voice, don't talk. Pay attention. Lu Fair wrinkled her nose and snorted. She opened her eyes wide and looked at Li Yundong seriously. Li Yundong put the file under the red silk in front of everyone and said with a smile, in fact, this file is a peerless sword. As long as I gently pull the red cloth, this file will cut it. Li Yunbo laughed and said, oh? Is it really that amazing? Su Chan also stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She couldn't figure out what Li Yundong was up to. Not only her, but Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, Feng Na, and everyone else also held their breath and stared at Li Yundong, wanting to see what kind of trick he was going to perform. They saw Li Yundong holding the file in one hand and the red cloth in the other. He took a deep breath, then suddenly shouted and stamped his foot. The people upstairs and downstairs only felt that Li Yundong's loud shout made them feel a little stuffy and dizzy for a moment. Especially when Li Yundong stamped his foot, the ground trembled slightly. Everyone was caught off guard and was startled. When they came to their senses again, they saw that the red silk in Li Yundong's hand had been cut in two. Li Yuanbo, who was closest to Li Yundong, only felt a blur in front of his eyes. A white light flashed and the red cloth was cut in two. The incision was extremely smooth and the cut was exactly where the file was. Li Yuanbo stared at the file in Li Yundong's hand for a second or two, then suddenly smiled and said, it is indeed a peerless sword. Good. At this time, everyone also cheered and nodded secretly. Some of them were cheering for Li Yundong's little trick, while others were cheering for Li Yundong's improvisation. Only Su Chan, Ziyuan, Ruan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and the cultivators of the Fox Zen school understood that Li Yundong had used the moment of shouting and stamping his foot to attract the attention of others. At the same time, he had used the Liuha to cut the red silk in an instant. However, the speed of the Liuha was extremely fast, almost beyond the range that people could see with the naked eye. Others only saw a flash of white light and thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them, but in fact, Li Yundong was skilled and bold. He had actually shown his sword in front of the governor. Ziyuan saw this and frowned secretly. Her heart was pounding because of Li Yundong. She thought to herself, Li Yundong is really getting bolder and bolder. Last time he struck Mount Longhu with lightning. This time he actually played with fire in front of the secretary of the provincial party committee. I really don't know what kind of trouble he will cause next time. Su Chan didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Seeing that Li Yundong had resolved the storm while talking and laughing, she immediately admired Li Yundong to the extreme. She looked at Li Yundong with admiration and said softly, Master, you are so amazing. I love you so much. Li Yundong glared at her secretly and whispered, hurry up and go down. Su Chan blinked and whispered, Secretary Li hasn't cut the ribbon yet. Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He smiled at Li Yuanbo and said, Secretary Li, I was so focused on the magic trick that I forgot to cut the ribbon. I actually cut it before you. I'm really sorry. Li Yuanbo laughed and said, it doesn't matter. You are the owner, so I can't steal the show, can I? As he said this, he casually cut the red silk in half with a pair of scissors. Seeing that the two of them had finished cutting the ribbon, everyone applauded at the same time and celebrated. At this time, Su Chan quickly put away the red silk, then made a face at Li Yundong and quickly ran into the storage room. Li Yundong looked at the little girl helplessly and shook his head secretly. He thought to himself, this girl is really unruly. She actually came up with such a trick at this time. Fortunately, I reacted quickly, or I would have made a fool of myself. While he was thinking, Li Yunbo smiled and said to Li Yundong, Xiao Li, can you give me the peerless sword in your hand? Li Yundong smiled and said, of course. As he said this, he handed it over with both hands. After taking the file, Li Yunbo played with it for a while and said with a smile, interesting, really interesting. Li Yundong was a little puzzled. What hasn't Secretary Li seen before? Why is he so interested in this small file? Li Yunbo played with the file for a while, then suddenly said to Li Yundong, by the way, I still don't know the name of your shop. Where is the plaque of your shop? It hasn't hung up yet, has it? Li Yundong smiled and said, I was just about to ask Secretary Li to unveil the plaque. Li Yunbo also smiled and said, I've touched all the good things. You can't speak ill of an old man like me behind my back. Li Yundong saw that as a senior official of the provincial party committee, Li Yunbo didn't put on any airs at all. He was humorous and amiable. He was secretly surprised and didn't say anything for a while. Zhou Qin smiled and said, Uncle Li, it's what we want for you to unveil the plaque. Don't talk so much. Hurry up and unveil the plaque. We've been waiting for so long. Li Yunbo smiled and said, okay, then I won't waste any more time. As he said this, he smiled at Li Yundong and said, Xiao Li, would you like to join us? Li Yundong smiled and said, then I'll do as you say. At this time, Ruan Hongling and Zi Yuan took the opportunity to take out the plaque. Li Yundong and Li Yunbo walked to the plaque and opened it together. Li Yunbo took a closer look and saw 3 big words written on the plaque. Desanxian. Li Yunbo's eyes suddenly lit up and he shouted, good calligraphy, really good calligraphy. Which master wrote it? Li Yundong smiled and pointed to Zi Yuan beside him, saying, this is the work of Zi Yuan, the second owner of Desanxian. Li Yunbo looked at Zi Yuan in shock and cried out involuntarily, the 8 immortals painting upstairs was also carved by you? Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, yes, I did. Li Yunbo's eyes widened and he kept shaking his head. Incredible, it's really incredible. You're so young. How did you practice your kung fu? Zi Yuan smiled slightly. Her smile was elegant and dignified like that of Guanyin in the world. It was amazing, but no one dared to offend her in the slightest. She said, in everything, cultivation is not based on time, but on one's heart. If the heart is there, the kung fu will be there. If the heart is not there, the kung fu will not be there. Li Yunbo was suddenly moved. He said solemnly, well said, Master Zi Yuan. I will remember your words. As he said this, he turned his head and said to Li Yundong, Xiao Li, I didn't expect to see an immortal here today. I didn't come in vain. Li Yundong asked knowingly, where are the immortals? Li Yunbo laughed and pointed to Zi Yuan. Isn't this it? A celestial appearance, celestial calligraphy, and celestial paintings. If this isn't a living celestial, then what is it? Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, knew that Li Yunbo was very shrewd and didn't praise people easily. At this time he had given Zi Yuan such an evaluation. Obviously he admired her to the extreme. She secretly admired him, but at the same time she was a little unconvinced. She was eager to have a try and compete with him in the future. Li Yundong didn't know what Zhou Qin was thinking. He smiled and said, Secretary Li, please sit inside. I'll hang this plaque up. Li Yunbo smiled and said, okay, hang it up quickly and let me have a look. As he said this, he looked at the people around him and said, hurry up and take this plaque upstairs. Do you want to use a ladder or a rope? As he spoke, he saw that Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and Zhou Qin were all standing still. Zhou Qin smiled and said, Uncle Li, Li Yundong can do it alone. Li Yunbo glared at her reproachfully and said, what nonsense are you talking about? This plaque is made of mahogany and is very heavy. I'm afraid it weighs more than 40 kilograms. How can one person carry it up? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Li Yundong suddenly grab the plaque with his hand. Then he shook his arm and slapped the bottom of the plaque with his palm. The plaque flew up and hung right in the middle of the tea house. Li Yundong's move was neat and elegant. All the people who saw it immediately cheered. Lu Fair, who was slowly eating snacks, also suddenly widened her eyes and the snacks in her hand fell to the ground. She said while stuttering, so handsome. Chow Kefi snorted proudly, as if she had been the one who had been in the limelight just now. That's handsome? There are more handsome ones behind. Li Yunbo looked up at the plaque hanging steadily, and then at Li Yundong with a face full of shock. He said, how did you throw such a heavy plaque up there? Li Yundong chuckled and said, it's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning. A trace of doubt suddenly flashed in Li Yuanbo's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He turned around with a smile and wanted to walk into the tea house with Li Yundong. At this time Han Lin, who had been hiding not far away and filming, suddenly ran over. He said loudly, "Reporter Li, can I do a brief interview with you?" Li Yuanbo frowned secretly and said lightly, "I'm here to attend a friend's celebration today. This kind of thing can't be done, right?" As he said this, he turned around and went into the tea house. Although it was a question, the tone of it was clear that there was no room for negotiation. Although Han Lin was arrogant, he was not a fool. He looked embarrassed and thought to himself, "If I only take pictures without an interview, I will still be scolded when I go back." Han Lin had no choice but to turn around and say to Li Yundong in a low voice, "Boss Li, I didn't recognize you just now and offended you. Please don't take it to heart. Can I do an interview with you? It's very short, just 1 minute." Li Yundong smiled slightly and asked, "Who are you?" Seeing that Li Yundong didn't seem to want to embarrass him, Han Lin was overjoyed and said, "I." But Li Yundong only waited for him to say one word before he raised his palm and said, "I'm sorry, I can't remember it even if you say it. Please." After that he turned around and left. Han Lin's face suddenly turned red. He stood there alone, panting heavily. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and left bitterly. Li Yundong went upstairs and settled everyone down. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He secretly wiped his sweat and thought to himself, "Everything should be fine now, right? I have to accompany these officials carefully all the time. It's really difficult to serve them. It's so painful." While he was thinking, he suddenly saw Su Chan running up with a frightened and nervous face. When Li Yundong saw her, he immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Madam, what's wrong with you again?" Su Chan hurriedly waved her hand, pulled Li Yundong aside and whispered, "Yundong, bad news?" Li Yundong asked curiously, "What's wrong? Look at how scared you are." Su Chan said anxiously, "No, there are 2 more guests." Li Yundong laughed and said, "If there are guests, then there will be more seats. Are there no seats left?" Su Chan stamped her feet and said, "No, no. These 2 people are Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping." Li Yundong was shocked. The lady of the earthly fire, Zhang Ling, and her disciple, Zhou Ping. Su Chan nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, it's them." Li Yundong took a deep breath and said, "Today is our opening ceremony. What are they doing here? Are they here to make trouble?" Chapter 412. Go to watch net. Li Yundong and Su Chan quickly went downstairs. Sure enough, they saw Zhou Ping and Zhang Ling standing at the door in their Taoist robes. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He slowed down and walked over slowly. Watch net. 7 km. Most of the people sitting in the tea room on the first floor were students, Li Yundong's friends, Lu Feier and the others. When they saw the 2 Taoist nuns standing at the door, they all turned their heads to look at them curiously. Only Zhou Qin, Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling looked at them nervously. Lu Feier held a cup of tea and looked at Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping curiously. She whispered, "Why are there still Taoist priests begging for alms now?" Lu Feier's mind was relatively simple. She didn't notice the vigilance and hostility of Li Yundong, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin and the others, but Chao Kefi was a clever person. She keenly captured the smell of gunpowder. Chao Kefi winked at Lu Feier and whispered, "Don't talk, there will be a good show later." Lu Feier asked curiously, "It's just 2 Taoist priests, what's so good about them?" As she spoke in a low voice, she suddenly saw Zhang Ling turn her head and glance at her. This glance was not very sharp, but when it landed on Lu Feier's face, she immediately swallowed all the words she was about to say. Her heart thumped wildly as if a hand was pressing down on her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. At this time, Li Yundong had already walked downstairs. Feng Na turned her head and saw Li Yundong. She smiled and said, "Li Yundong, there are 2 Taoist priests here to beg alms. Do you want to?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "They're not here to beg for alms." As he said this, he cupped his hands and said to Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping in a deep voice, "Jinren Zhang, what brings you here today?" Zhou Ping stood to one side and didn't say anything, which was rare. She just stared at Li Yunyang with an unfriendly gaze. Zhang Ling, who was next to her, formed a palm with one hand and said, "Amateus, Jinren Li, how have you been since we parted on Mount Gazao?" Li Yundong also returned the salute and said lightly, "Jinren Zhang, you are still as elegant as ever. I wonder why you have the time to visit my store today?" The people around them saw Li Yundong and Zhang Ling saluting and speaking in a genteel manner, just like ancient people. They all felt strange and looked at them curiously. Zhang Ling glanced around faintly and said, I heard that Jinren Li has opened a tea house. As fellow Taoists, how can I not come to celebrate? Li Yundong's heart trembled. He cupped his hands and said, Jinren Zhang, you're too polite. I don't deserve it. It's just that there are so many distinguished guests here. I wonder how Jinren Zhang wants to celebrate. Zhang Ling suddenly smiled and said meaningfully, Jinren Li, since you dared to show your sword in public just now, you must be very confident in your magic cultivation, right? Li Yundong's eyes narrowed slightly, but he soon smiled and pretended to be stupid. What do you mean by showing your sword in public? Daoist Zhang's words sound really strange. Zhou Ping, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but shout in a low voice, Li Yundong, don't pretend to be confused. Just now, you dared to show your powerful magical weapon in front of the secretary of the provincial party committee. Are you tired of living? Li Yundong glanced at her indifferently. I don't understand what you're saying either. Zhang Ling snorted and also lowered her voice. Jinren Li, it's fine if you play with fire but don't get us involved. Li Yundong drawled and said, Oh? What do you mean? Zhang Ling said coldly, don't use magic in front of secular mortals. This is the iron law of our cultivation world. Don't you know that? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Is that so? Why do I remember that we can't let secular mortals see us using magic? Besides you, did anyone else notice anything just now? Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong coldly. Her eyes didn't blink, and her expression was very unfriendly. Li Yundong was also secretly vigilant, and his whole body was covered with jinqi. At this time, Feng Na and the others also noticed that there was something wrong between Zhang Ling and Li Yundong. Although they didn't know what Li Yundong and Zhang Ling had said, they could see that the two of them were about to fight. Feng Na said to Zhou Qi nervously, Hey, what's going on? Are these two Taoist priests looking for trouble? Hurry up and call the police. Zhou Qin was even more nervous than Feng Na, but after all, she was the daughter of a rich family and had seen many big scenes. She said calmly in a low voice, It's okay. With Li Yundong here, nothing will happen. At this time, Lu Fair also grabbed Chao Kefi's arm and said with some fear that the world would not be in chaos, Hey, sure enough, it seems that they are going to fight. Wow, as a master you won't even hit a woman, will you? Chao Kefi's expression was strange. Although she felt uncomfortable in her heart, she still defended Li Yundong and said, Li Yundong is not such a person. However, you have to know that some women in this world really deserve a beating. At this time Yin Mingfan, who was standing to one side, turned around and glared at them. Don't be so noisy. I can't hear them. The two women immediately shut up and continued to look at Li Yundong and the others with great interest. Zhang Ling stared at Li Yundong for a long time. Suddenly she burst out laughing and said, Jinren Li is really skilled and bold. Good, I admire you. Since you said so, I'd like to try Jinren Li's ability to fight in public. Li Yundong's eyes suddenly showed a sharp look. He said coldly, Jinren Zhang, today is the opening ceremony of Desanxian. Do you have to make trouble today? Zhang Ling snorted coldly. Jinren Li, I think you are mistaken. Before you showed your sword in public, I didn't want to come to you, but since you dared to show your powerful magical weapon in public, it means that you are very confident in your ability to fight in public. Then, any cultivator around can challenge you for the purpose of maintaining the laws of the cultivation world. Otherwise, if you are not discovered this time, what will you do if you are discovered next time? Li Yundong frowned. He tilted his head slightly and whispered to Ziyuan, Is there such a rule? Ziyuan also quickly whispered, Yes. There is an unwritten rule in the cultivation world. If any cultivator uses magic treasures or magic in public in a busy city, then all the cultivators who see it have the right to stop it. The purpose is to prevent people from maliciously publicizing magic treasures in the cultivation world to the world, causing chaos in the world and attracting the vigilance and suppression of the government. Li Yundong nodded slightly. Seeing that he couldn't avoid this battle, he simply calmed down and said in a deep voice, Well, how do you want to fight, Jinren Zhang? How about we find a remote place where there is no one? Zhang Ling smiled. She looked around and said, Why do we need to find a place where there is no one? Since Taoist Zhang dares to show off his magic weapon in front of so many people, then why don't we compete according to the convention of the cultivation world? Let's see who is the first to be discovered by the surrounding people, and who loses. At this time, Ziyuan whispered in Li Yundong's ear, This is a battle between great cultivators. Often relying on their profound Taoist magic, they often do something bold and skillful. They use magic and powerful magical weapons in public in front of the world, but they don't let them see the mystery of it. They only think that it is a magic trick. But if one of them is destroyed by the other or if the mystery is discovered by the world, then it will be considered as the loser. Li Yundong smiled gratefully at Ziyuan and nodded. I understand. He said to Zhang Ling, in that case how should we fight? Zhang Ling pondered for a moment, but before she could speak she suddenly heard an old man's voice. Haha, what a coincidence. It turns out that Jinren Zhang is also here. When they heard the voice, they looked in the direction of the voice and saw an old man wearing a Taoist robe, with a slender Taoist nun beside him. They were walking quickly. When Li Yundong saw them, he immediately frowned. These two people were none other than Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan. Zheng Yuan's face was flushed and kind. People who didn't know him well would feel close to him when they saw his face. Ding Nan, who was next to him, was wearing a Taoist robe for the first time. Although the robe was loose and covered her slim figure, her face was like a peach blossom and she was tall. Wearing the Taoist robe made her even more attractive. Li Yundong took a deep look at Ding Nan and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing here?" Ding Nan smiled slightly and said, "Li Yundong, you and I are classmates. I heard that you opened a shop here. As a classmate and fellow Taoist, I came to congratulate you. Don't you welcome me?" Zheng Yuan also smiled kindly and said, "My beloved disciple is really nostalgic. She insisted on coming here and I couldn't stop her. Jinren Li, you can't be so unreasonable, can you?" Li Yundong snorted. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a surprised voice coming from not far away. "Hey Leader Zheng, you're here too? Ah, Jinren Zhang, you're here too?" Everyone looked over and saw that Du Fei of the Chuanjin Dragon sect was also wearing a Taoist robe. He was looking at Li Yundong and the others in surprise. Li Yundong was also surprised. "Jinren Du, why are you here?" Du Fei's face was full of smiles. He bowed and said, "Amateus Jinren Li, you opened a shop without telling me. It's obvious that you don't treat me as a friend, so I had to come uninvited." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart. "I just don't want the cultivation world to get involved in this, so I want to keep a low profile. Now, both those who should come and those who shouldn't have come are here." Ziyuan seemed to know what Li Yundong was thinking. She said in a low voice, "Li Yundong, you are a cultivator. Since you chose to open a shop in the downtown area, it's impossible to avoid being disturbed by fellow Taoists. You should be aware of this and be mentally prepared." Su Chan also grabbed Li Yundong's arm and whispered, "Yundong, I'm sorry. I've caused you trouble again." Li Yundong glanced at Ziyuan and smiled at her. Then he patted Su Chan's head and said with a smile, "Silly girl, don't be silly. Even if you don't cause me trouble, trouble will come to me." Zhang Ling, who was standing to one side, nodded lightly to Zheng Yuan and Du Fei as a greeting. She said, "Since Jinren Du and Leader Zheng are here, you can be witnesses." Leader Zheng and Du Fei asked in unison, "What witnesses?" While they were talking, Lu Feier, Chao Kefi and Yin Mingfan, who were in the tea house, were craning their necks to listen to their conversation. Lu Feier said, "Hey, I heard them say the word witness. What did you hear?" Yin Mingfan said with a strange expression, "I didn't hear it clearly. It's too noisy here, especially upstairs. There are even people playing finger-guessing games. Do they really think this tea house is a restaurant?" Chao Kefi also sighed. "I only heard something about a real person or a fake person. I didn't hear anything else clearly." Lu Feier blinked. "Why don't we just go over and listen to what they're saying?" Chao Kefi hesitated for a moment. "That's not good. Don't you see that they are all Taoist priests? Maybe they have something to do." Lu Feier pouted and said unhappily, "It's really annoying. They asked me to see a master, but I didn't see a master. I only saw a group of stinky officials and a group of stinky Taoist priests." As soon as she finished speaking, Chao Kefi and Yin Mingfan widened their eyes and looked outside the door. They saw a luxurious Mercedes-Benz slowly driving in. Two young men and a woman got out of the Mercedes-Benz. The man was handsome, but his eyes were a little lecherous. The woman had a baby face, but her figure was particularly hot and sexy. Yin Mingfan said, "Isn't that the young master of the Shen family and Shen Hui? Why are they here?" When Li Yundong saw the two of them, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. He complained to himself, "Why are these two lawless guys here? It's getting more and more lively." Well, a spoiler. The girl on the cover is Su Chan. Previous chapter, next chapter recommendation, previous page, return to the table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 413. Go to watch net. Xin Yu and Xin Hui got out of the car. They looked at the tea house of Desangxian and showed disdainful expressions at the same time. However, when an old man behind them got out of the car, they pretended to appreciate and praise it at the same time and kept nodding and commenting. Go to watch net? The old man was Xin Wankai. He glanced at Xin Hui and Xin Yu who were pretending. He snorted and said, "Stop pretending. Can you two idiots understand the mystery of calligraphy?" Xin Yu snorted and turned his head away, looking disapproving. However, Xin Hui stamped her feet angrily and said to Xin Wankai, "Old master, how can you say that to me in front of so many people?" Xin Wankai snorted and said, "What else can I say? Look at him. He started from scratch at such a young age, and look at yourself. What else can you do except cause trouble all day long?" As he spoke, he ignored the two of them and took the lead to walk toward the tea house of Desangxian. Xin Hui was so angry that she gritted her teeth and glared at Li Yundong as if she were looking at an enemy. Xin Yu, who was beside her, suddenly came over and said with a smile, "Little sister, why don't we go together?" Xin Hui immediately turned her head and shouted at him, "Get out of here. Who wants to go with you?" As she said this, she immediately chased after Xin Wankai. Xin Yu's face was extremely ugly. He stood there for a while with a gloomy expression, then followed her. Xin Wankai glanced around quickly. When he saw Ziyuan and Li Yundong, he immediately laughed and greeted them happily. He said to Ziyuan, "Miss Ziyuan, last time we parted in Dongwu City, I was in such a hurry that I didn't have time to say a few words to you. This time, I heard that you opened a tea house in Tiannan City, so I came uninvited to pay my respects." Ziyuan smiled slightly, turned sideways, spread out her palm, pointed at Li Yundong and said, "It's not me who opened the tea shop. The owner is Li Yundong. Mr. Xin should congratulate him." Xin Wankai chuckled. He looked at Ziyuan meaningfully and then at Li Yundong. He said, "Congratulations. Child Li is young and promising. At such a young age you have opened an extraordinary tea house. Amazing, amazing." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not at all. We opened this tea house together. It's definitely not my credit alone. Xiao Xin, you have also contributed to this." Xin Wankai asked curiously, "Oh? What do you mean?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "If you hadn't awarded the first place to Ziyuan last time, our tea house wouldn't have been able to open. Therefore, Xiao Xin, you deserve the most credit." Xin Wankai laughed out loud and said, "Miss Ziyuan deserved the first place last time. I was just handling it impartially. But, in this case, it was right for me to come uninvited." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Mr. Xin, you're too polite. It's an honor for Desangxian to have you here. Please come in." Qin Wankai looked at Zhang Ling and the others beside Li Yunyang with a smile. Seeing that they were wearing Taoist robes, he asked curiously, "Are they begging for alms?" Zhou Ping glared at him rudely. "You're the one begging for alms. We are just—" Before she could finish speaking, Zhang Ling stopped her, glared at her, and then said lightly, "Are you Mr. Xin of the Wankai group?" Xin Wankai saw that although Zhang Ling's appearance was ordinary, her gaze was deep and her eyes were bright. The cinnabar red mole between her eyebrows was especially eye-catching, making her look extraordinary and definitely not an ordinary person. Qin Wankai was surprised in his heart. He asked, "I'm Qin Wankai. May I ask who you are?" Zhang Ling smiled faintly and said, "It doesn't matter who I am, but I heard that you are not only a business genius, but also an elegant person, so I want to ask you to be a notary. How about that?" Qin Wankai asked curiously, "What notary?" Zhang Ling pointed at Li Yundong and said, "Jinren Li and I have agreed to perform a few small tricks, so I want to ask you to be a notary to see who wins and who loses." Qin Wankai asked curiously, "Small tricks? Jinren Li?" He looked at Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Is Child Li also a cultivator?" Li Yundong cupped his hands in obeisance and said with a smile, "Sorry to make you laugh, Mr. Shen." Qin Wankai laughed and corrected himself. "I was wondering why Jinren Li looked so extraordinary and didn't look like an ordinary person. It turns out that he is a member of the Taoist sect." He turned to look at Ziyuan and said, "So Miss Ziyuan is also a Taoist?" Ziyuan bowed and said, "Yes." Qin Wankai turned his head and glanced at Xin Yu and Xin Hui. He thought to himself, "I originally wanted to find two teachers for these two good-for-nothings, so I took the initiative to come here. On the one hand, I wanted to see how their tea house was like, and on the other hand I wanted to show my sincerity. But I didn't expect them to be Taoist priests. If I invited them to be teachers, wouldn't it be a little inappropriate?" Qin Wankai thought quickly, but he soon thought, Since I'm here, I might as well take things as they come. It's good to see them perform some small tricks. He just didn't know if the tea ceremony last time was also a magic trick. Thinking of this, Chen Wankai laughed and said to Zhang Ling, I don't have any other hobbies, but I like to uphold justice. Well, I'll be the notary. Where are you going to perform the trick? Zhang Ling looked around and said lightly, let's do it in the hall downstairs. Jinrenli, what do you think? Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong with a hint of provocation in her eyes. Li Yundong smiled slightly. Okay. As you wish, Jinren Zhang. Du Fei, who was standing to one side, saw that Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were about to fight. He frowned secretly, then suddenly smiled and said, Jinrenli, I'll also be a witness. How about that? Li Yundong glanced at him. For a moment he didn't know what this jade-faced golden monkey was up to. He was a little hesitant. Just as he was hesitating, he saw Du Fei turn around and say to him in a low voice, Jinren Zhang is good at 19 kinds of great shintong and 43 kinds of small shintong. Jinrenli, be careful, especially her 5 ghosts technique and the fairy descending to the world. Ziyuan also sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong. Although the Chuanjin Dragon sect and the Jingyi school are polite on the surface, in fact they seem to be united but are actually divided. They are secretly competing with each other. Li Yundong, you might as well let Du Fei be a notary. He needs our help now, so he shouldn't be secretly hindering us. Moreover, if Chen Wankai makes a wrong judgment, he can help you correct it. Although Li Yundong secretly wondered what the 5 ghost technique and the fairy descending to the world were, he already had an idea in his heart. He smiled and said, well, since Jinren Du is so warm-hearted, I'll have to trouble you. After he finished speaking, Zheng Yuan also smiled and said, in that case, I'll also join in the fun and be a notary. What do you think? Li Yundong frowned and looked at Zheng Yuan unkindly. He didn't say anything, but Zhang Ling pondered for a moment and said, well, since Jinren Du has become a notary, Leader Zheng should also be a notary. Zheng Yuan laughed and said, well, Jinren Zhang is really straightforward. I wonder what trick Jinren Zhang and Jinren Li are going to compete in the first round? Zhang Ling said lightly, there are too many people here so I can't show it. Let's play a little trick. As she said this, she said to Li Yundong, Jinren Li, please bring a table, a teacup and an opaque cover. Li Yundong turned his head and was about to give an order to Su Chan, but he saw that the little girl had already run to the opposite side and moved another table over. Zhou Qin turned around and took a teacup and a large teapot from the storage room. At this time, everyone upstairs and downstairs noticed the movement below. Some of them were curious, so they went to the railing on the second floor and looked down. Li Yuanbua and the others were sitting next to the railing, drinking tea while watching the movement downstairs. Mayor Zheng of Tianan City laughed and said, haha, there are actually tricks to watch. Xiao Li's opening ceremony is a bit original. Not bad, not bad. Young people nowadays are creative and promising. Although Mayor Zheng was joking, he was actually secretly trying to get close to Li Yuanbua. As a person who had been in politics for a long time, he could certainly see that Li Yuanbua was close to Zhou Qin, and he could also see that Zhou Qin was close to Li Yundong. Therefore, flattering Li Yundong in a roundabout way was also good for him to get close to the leader. How could Li Yuanbua not understand this? He glanced at Mayor Zheng, chuckled, and said non-committally, after all, young people like to play. This sentence made Mayor Zheng a little confused. He thought to himself, is he praising Li Yundong or belittling him? Just as he was thinking about it, Lu Feier also took Chao Kefi's arm and whispered, hey, Sister Chao, what kind of tricks do you think they will perform later? Chao Kefi stared at the field and shook her head. I don't know. Anyway, there will be a good show later. Lu Feier said curiously and expectantly, will it be magic? Can Li Yundong do magic? Chao Kefi burst into laughter. He is not Lu Qian. Just pay attention to him later. He won't let you down. At this time, Zhang Ling looked at the square table in front of her. She gently patted the corner of the table with her palm, causing it to slide 2 meters away. Then she said, please ask the notary to check the teacup and teapot to see if they are ordinary teacups and teapots. Chen Wankai didn't know how they were going to compete and felt strange in his heart, but he still went forward to take a closer look at the teacup and teapot. He knocked them up and down and even reached into the teapot to touch it. He said, no problem, they are ordinary teacups and teapots. Zhang Ling then said to Du Fei and Zheng Yuan, Jinren, please check them. Du Fei smiled and said, no need. Zheng Yuan also laughed. Why do we need to check? Zhang Ling turned her face and said lightly to Li Yundong, Jinren Li, although this is your tea set, do you want to check it? Li Yundong was full of doubts. Li Yunyang was full of doubts. He didn't know how Zhang Ling was going to fight with him in front of so many people without being noticed. He frowned slightly and said, "No, Jinren Zhang, how do you want to compete and how do you want to decide the winner?" Zhang Ling smiled faintly. As if she was performing a magic trick, a horsetail whisk suddenly appeared in her hand. Then, with a shake of her arm, the horsetail whisk hit the bottom of the tea table with a bang. The teacup on the tea table jumped up, and the lid of the teapot also jumped up. The teacup flipped over, and just as the lid of the teapot jumped up, it fell into the teapot next to it, making a crisp sound. Her kung fu was elegant and beautiful, and it immediately attracted cheers from all over the tea house. Chen Wansai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He was worried that the teacup would fall into the teapot and break, so he went forward and opened the lid of the teapot to take a look. He saw that the teacup had fallen right in the middle of the teapot, without any damage. Chen Wankai immediately raised his head, gave Zhang Ling a thumbs up and said loudly, "What a good kung fu. I admire you." As he said this, he took 3 steps back and looked at the field with bright eyes. Xin Yu and Xin Hui looked at each other. Although they were very disdainful of Li Yundong, they were young after all, and it was inevitable for them to love fun. Therefore they looked at the field curiously, wanting to see how Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were going to perform this trick. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Vote recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents. Next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Raising a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Raising a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Raising a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 4:14. Go to watch net. On the first day of the opening of Desangxian's tea house, the upper and lower floors were full of celebrities from all walks of life. There were business beauties like Yin Mengfan and Chao Kefi, film and television stars like Lu Feier, senior political officials like Li Yuanbua, and billionaires like Shen Wankai. Go to watch net. With so many people gathered together and their eyes fixed on one place, Li Yundong was going to fight in public in front of so many celebrities. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at all. At present, Zhang Ling said it politely and said that it was a trick in public, but in fact this behavior was no different from challenging the dojo. If he lost, although the mortals around him could not see anything, the cultivation world would immediately spread the news. On the first day of opening, he had failed in a battle. This was tantamount to being slapped in the face in public, which was a great shame. Li Yundong knew that he absolutely could not lose and there was no way out. However, he had only cultivated for a little more than half a year. In private, one-on-one battles, his strength was extremely tyrannical, and there were few cultivators of the younger generation who could match him. However, fighting in public was different from fighting in private. Li Yundong's cultivation time was still short, so how could he know the mystery of fighting in public? He was secretly a little vigilant and awe-inspiring, but he heard Zhang Ling say in a clear voice, "Li Yundong and I will do a little trick. Please watch carefully." As she said that, she pointed at the big teapot and said, "Just now, everyone saw that there is a small teacup in the big teapot. What I'm going to do is to make the teacup disappear without getting close to the teapot. And what Li Yundong needs to do is to find a way to change the teacup back. If he can change it back, I lose. If he can't, I win." As soon as she said this, the people upstairs and downstairs were suddenly surprised and whispered to each other with great interest, "This trick is a little interesting. If you don't get close, how can it disappear? Could it be that there's nothing inside? That's impossible. Didn't Shen Wankai see it just now? No one approached it just now." Lu Feier also asked curiously, "Sister Chao, if you don't get close, how can the teacup inside disappear?" Chao Kefi also frowned and shook her head. "I don't know. If I knew, I would have gone to the Spring Festival Gala." Yin Mingfan said in a low voice, "Don't say any more. Just watch. Who knows if it will disappear." After hearing Zhang Ling's words, Li Yundong was also surprised and thought to himself, "What kind of fight is this? Wasn't this just like magic? It was really a magic trick?" Just as he was wondering, Zhang Ling flicked her horsetail whisk and threw out a talisman. The talisman had strange patterns drawn on it. It hung in the air without moving or falling. After a while, it slowly burned to ashes. At this time, the people who were watching the show outside the arena were surprised and sighed. The corners of Zhang Ling's mouth curled up, revealing a hint of pride. She flicked her horsetail whisk over the teapot and said, "I've already taken the teacups inside." The crowd exclaimed, and many people hurriedly asked, "President Shen, quickly check if the teacup is still there." Only then did Shen Wankai come to his senses. He walked over to the teapot, opened the lid and looked inside. At this time Xinyu, Xinhui, Lu Feier, Chao Kefi and the others who were closer to the table, also unconsciously stretched out their heads and looked into the teapot. When they saw it they were stunned. The teapot was empty. Not to mention the teacup, there was not even a hair. They stared blankly and said in a daze, "It's gone. The teacup is gone." The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar and said one after another, "No way. Let me see." At this time, although many people upstairs were high-ranking officials and celebrities, they couldn't hold back at this time. They rushed downstairs and looked at the teapot. Only then did they believe it. They all looked at Zhang Ling with their eyes wide open, shook their heads secretly and marveled, "Incredible, it's really amazing. How did you do it?" However, Zhang Ling lowered her eyes as if she hadn't seen them at all. She remained silent. These people who had asked questions had no choice but to return to their seats and whisper to each other. For a time there was a lot of noise upstairs and downstairs. Most of them were discussing how Zhang Ling had made the teacup in the teapot disappear. At this time, Li Yundong was also dumbfounded. He had only cultivated for a short time, so he didn't understand what was going on at all. He cursed in his heart and thought, "Damn it, I don't even understand it. How can I fight with her later? Where did she put the teacup? How would I know?" Not only him, but Su Chan and the members of the Fox Zen school were also staring blankly and helpless. Su Chan had been cultivating since she was a child, so she hadn't seen any clues, let alone Zhou Qin. She was secretly anxious and kept looking at Li Yundong. Even Ruan Hongling, who came from a famous righteous sect, didn't understand the mystery at all. She frowned and said to Ziyuan via voice transmission, "Sister Ziyuan, what's going on? Why can't I understand it?" At this time, Ziyuan secretly frowned and also said via voice transmission, "It's normal. Those who dare to fight in public and are not afraid of ordinary people seeing through the mystery are all top cultivators. Their techniques and magic are extremely magical. Not to mention you, even I don't understand it." As she spoke, her heart suddenly moved. She looked at the talisman that was still hanging in the air. With this look, a smile suddenly appeared on the corner of her mouth. Ziyuan quickly sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong and said, "Li Yundong, the talisman in front of you is the goddess Nyan seal, which is also the invisibility talisman. Just now, Zhang Ling must have released her yang spirit and used the invisibility talisman to hide it from the world. At the moment when the yang spirit took the teacup out of the teapot, the yang spirit turned into yin spirit, passed through the teapot and took the teacup. You saw Zhang Ling flick her horsetail whisk just now to attract the attention of the people around her and cover up the moment when the teacup was taken out." Li Yundong suddenly understood. Just as he was about to turn his head and speak to Ziyuan, he heard her voice transmission again. "Don't turn your head, or it will be regarded as cheating. In a moment you release the yang spirit and I will release the goddess Nyan seal. Then you use the yang spirit to hit the talisman floating in front of Zhang Ling. Once the talisman is destroyed, her yang spirit will definitely be exposed and she will have to take it back. Once the yang spirit is taken back, the teacup will automatically appear." After hearing Ziyuan's words, Li Yundong nodded very slightly, indicating that he had understood. At this time, Ziyuan said via voice transmission, "I will count to 3 and we will do it at the same time. In a while I will stick the talisman on your sleeve. The moment you release the yang spirit, you will throw out the talisman and stick it on the yang spirit." At this time, Ziyuan stood behind Li Yundong. With a flip of her 5 fingers, she took out a talisman from her sleeve. Using Li Yundong's figure as a cover, she quickly drew a goddess Nyan seal, and then she said via voice transmission, 1, 2, 3. When she counted to 3, Li Yundong instantly released his yang spirit. At the same time, Ziyuan quickly stuck the talisman on Li Yundong's sleeve. Li Yundong swung his arm at the same time, and the talisman immediately hung in front of him, just hanging on his yang spirit. Li Yundong and Ziyuan had an excellent tacit understanding. It was almost as if one person was casting magic. At this time, no one upstairs and downstairs could see any flaws. They only felt that Li Yundong's body shook slightly, and then he also threw out a talisman like Zhang Ling. It was also suspended in the air and did not fall to the ground. After a while it was burned to ashes. Although they saw that Li Yundong's technique was the same as Zhang Ling's, they were all excited and wanted to see how Li Yundong would change the teacup back. Only Zhang Ling secretly frowned and gave Ziyuan, who was behind Li Yundong, a meaningful look. After Li Yundong's yang spirit went out of his body, although he couldn't see Zhang Ling's yang spirit in front of him, he knew that Zhang Ling couldn't see his yang spirit either. He secretly made a handprint, a fixed fundamental mudra, and suddenly chopped toward Zhang Ling. Li Yundong's invisible yang spirit made a Mahamudra, and everyone felt a sudden movement in the air. Then there was a sudden loud bang in the tea house, as if someone's palms had hit each other, causing the air to tremble. Especially the people on the first floor, they only felt that there was an invisible wave of qi in the air rushing toward them, making them suffocate. Li Yundong's Mahamudra was blocked, and he immediately became spirited, because he knew that Zhang Ling's yang spirit was really in front of him, as Ziyuan had said. He immediately controlled his yang spirit to rush forward, and at the same time he quickly made a Mahavairakana Mudra with both hands and slapped toward Zhang Ling. Li Yundong's Mahamudra was blocked, and he immediately felt a strong wind in front of him. When the two forces intersected, Li Yundong vaguely saw a woman in gorgeous clothes standing in front of him. He couldn't see the woman's appearance clearly, but Li Yundong could clearly feel that the belt on her body was like a steel whip and iron chain, whipping toward his yang spirit body. Li Yundong stepped back. After making a Mahamudra, he immediately blocked the direction of the strong wind with both hands. With this block, the yang spirits of the two people suddenly came into contact, and both of them instantly saw each other's yang spirits. Li Yundong was shocked. He thought that both of their yang spirits had been exposed. His heart trembled and his yang spirit was also affected. He hesitated for a moment. As he hesitated, Zhang Ling's yang spirit immediately tied Li Yundong up like countless fairy-tied ropes. In the blink of an eye he was tightly tied up. Li Yundong was shocked. He wanted to struggle, but he was afraid that the movement would become louder and louder. If he didn't struggle he would definitely lose. Just as he was in a dilemma, he heard Ziyuan's urgent voice transmission. Li Yundong, don't worry. You haven't been exposed. When the two Nyan goddess seals touch each other, they will offset each other's invisibility, but this is only for two cultivators with Nyan goddess seals. Others can't see it. Hurry up and run outside. This place is narrow and it's suitable for Zhang Ling, not for you. When Li Yundong heard this, he immediately had an idea. He immediately used his yang spirit strength and rushed out of the door like a violent bull. Zhang Ling's yang spirit, who was tied up by Li Yundong's belt, was also forcibly dragged out, and the two of them flew into the air. As soon as Li Yundong flew into the air, he was like a dragon swimming in the sea and a tiger entering the mountains. He no longer had any scruples. With a loud shout, his Jinchi surged out, and his yang spirit body rapidly and violently expanded. In just a moment he had become an iron arhat more than 3 meters tall. Chapter 4:15. Go to watch net. Li Yundong's yang spirit continued to grow, and Zhang Ling's yang spirit was suddenly shocked. Her expression turned cold as she said coldly, "It's really rare to see someone who can cultivate to your level at such a young age." At this time, Li Yundong was looking at Zhang Ling's yang spirit in the air. He saw that she was extremely beautiful and ethereal, like a fairy in the heavenly palace. He sneered and said, "Your yang spirit is very beautiful. Is it to make up for your lack of beauty?" There was a flash of anger in Zhang Ling's eyes, but soon she burst out laughing again. "The body is just a bag of skin. We cultivators cultivate the yang spirit body. The yang spirit is the most valuable thing to cultivate. Only the yang spirit can overcome life, old age, illness and death, but the body can't. Li Yundong, you've made such a big name for yourself, but you can't see through this? What's so good about this stinky body of mine? Moreover, the yang spirit body represents your original God spirit, and it was not deliberately created by me. If you don't even understand this, how can you cultivate?" Zhang Ling shouted, "My original deity is the fairy of the 9th heaven. Li Yundong, you are no match for me. Surrender." After saying that, Zhang Ling's quintessential essence surged and his body shook slightly. After a while he split from 1 person to 2 and then from 2 to 4. Watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong was shocked. He saw Zhang Ling's yang spirit attacking from all directions. It was difficult for his 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. For a moment, it was difficult for him to defend himself and he was exhausted. "Damn it, what kind of spell is this? If you have the ability, fight me one-on-one." Li Yundong gritted his teeth and roared loudly. Zhang Ling controlled her 4 doppelgangers and beat Li Yundong until he had no room to fight back. She laughed and said, "Li Yundong, the Shentong magic of our Jingyi school is mysterious and can change at will. How can a beginner like you understand it?" He suddenly remembered that when he had just cultivated to the Yangshan phase and the Yangshan had left his body, he and Suchan had been laughing and playing in the room. He had changed from a child to a teenager and then to a young man. He had changed as he pleased. It could be said that he could become as big as he wanted as long as his Jinchi could support it. At this moment, Li Yundong suddenly felt as if a door in his mind had been pushed open by someone, and he had entered a new world. Things that he hadn't understood in the past suddenly became clear to him. When Li Yundong first started cultivating, he had always felt that cultivation was very unreliable, because the purpose of cultivators was to get rid of old age, illness, and death. They wanted to jump out of the inevitable laws of nature and reach the realm of immortality. However, the more cultivation books he read, the more he found that almost no cultivator's body was immortal. Whether it was Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, or Sun Lutong, who had obtained it during the Republic of China, their deaths were all recorded in history, especially Wang Chongyang. After his death, his body had been dug up and abandoned in the wilderness. In Li Yundong's opinion, since such a cultivator couldn't escape death, what was the use of cultivating? But now this question made Li Yundong suddenly see the light. Although Zhang Ling had reprimanded Li Yundong just now, her words had revealed a secret of the cultivation world. The ultimate goal of cultivators was not to cultivate their bodies to the point of immortality, but to cultivate their yang spirit to the point of immortality. The physical body would die, but it was just a bag that carried the yang spirit, and the yang spirit was eternal. Li Yundong thought to himself, the yang spirit is a spirit body, and it can change at will. Since Zhang Ling can change into four and turn her yang spirit into the original god, why can't I? As soon as this thought came to mind, Li Yundong's yang spirit began to change obviously. A black aura came out of his body, making him look like he was surrounded by dark clouds. His skin was as dark as steel, and a red and black aura came out of his nostrils. Zhang Ling didn't know that her casual words had inadvertently made Li Yundong understand the Tao. She saw that Li Yundong's yang spirit suddenly became extremely ferocious, and two different auras came out of his nostrils. She was shocked and said coldly, "You really have cultivated the heavenly Jindan technique, and you have even cultivated to the 8th phase. It's really rare for someone to be able to cultivate to your level at such a young age. However, do you think you can deal with me at the 8th phase?" When Zhang Ling spoke, the four doppelgangers spoke at the same time. Their voices came from all directions, seeming to be extremely powerful and oppressive. The air around them was shaking constantly, as if the fairy of Jiutian was scolding them loudly. But as soon as Zhang Ling's voice fell, Li Yundong's yang spirit body made a crashing sound, and a human body grew out from one side of his shoulder, with an extra head and 2 arms. Then, another human body grew out from the other side with another head and 2 arms. This time Zhang Ling was shocked. She fixed her eyes on Li Yundong's yang spirit and said in shock, "Akalanatha? This is impossible. You are obviously a Taoist cultivator. How can your original god spirit transform into Akalanatha?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Is there something you don't know? Watch me." After that, Li Yundong rushed toward one of Zhang Ling's doppelgangers like a black whirlwind. Zhang Ling was shocked and confused, and her combat strength was greatly reduced. This doppelganger was beaten back, and the other 3 doppelgangers shouted at the same time and rushed toward Li Yundong. The yang spirits of the 2 men were fighting fiercely in mid-air, but their bodies were motionless in the shop of the Desanxian, like 2 stone statues. The customers in the store were all confused. They whispered to each other, "What's going on? Why didn't he move?" "That's right. What is young Master Li doing? Why is he stunned? Is there no way to get the cup back? I haven't seen him move at all. How can he know that he can't get it back without trying? Maybe he's thinking of a way?" Lu Fair also whispered to Chow Kefi, "Sister Chow, what are they doing? Are they competing to see who can stare longer?" Chow Kefi glared at her and said, "Shut up." She was also secretly worried about Li Yundong, wondering if there was any way she could help him save some face if Li Yundong lost. But Chow Kefi's concern made her panic, especially at this time, when there were celebrities from all walks of life sitting upstairs and downstairs. No matter who it was, she couldn't afford to offend them. Her words carried little weight, so how could she say anything? For a moment, Chow Kefi was so anxious that she clenched her fists, and her palms were all sweaty. As for Ziyuan, Su Chan, Zhou Qin and the other cultivators, they were even more nervous than the people around them. They all widened their eyes and stared at Li Yundong. From time to time, they glanced at Zhang Ling, trying to judge the changes in the battle through their expressions. Seeing Li Yundong's angry eyes and frown at the beginning, they couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They thought to themselves, "Oh no, Li Yundong must be at a disadvantage." After a while, seeing that Li Yundong was still gritting his teeth, they couldn't help looking at Zhang Ling anxiously, only to see that Zhang Ling was also frowning and glaring. The two of them stared at each other as if they were competing to see who could stare the other to death first. Zhou Qin hadn't been cultivating for a long time, so she couldn't help whispering to Su Chan, "Su Chan, what's going on? Why are the two of them not moving?" Su Chan whispered to Zhou Qin, "I guess their yang spirits must be fighting secretly, so both of them are concentrating on controlling the yang spirits and don't dare to relax at all." Zhou Qin was shocked. "Yang spirits fighting? Where? Why didn't I see it?" Su Chan whispered, "Didn't you see both of them throw out a talisman just now? Although I didn't see the pattern of that talisman clearly, I guess it was the goddess Nyan seal, which is also the invisibility talisman. These two invisibility talismans secretly hide the yang spirits of the two of them, so we can't see them fighting." Hearing this, Zhou Qin's heart was filled with awe and curiosity. She looked around and whispered, "Will they be around us?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "I don't think so. I guess they should be in the air." Zhou Qin sighed in a low voice, "Su Chan, you know so much." Su Chan giggled. "Sister Zhou Qin, you're the one who knows a lot." Zhou Qin smiled slightly and didn't say anything. While the two of them were whispering to each other, Ziyuan frowned slightly. She looked up at the sky outside and then at the people around her. Seeing that they were all staring at the field, she walked out quietly. As soon as she moved, Du Fei and Jing Yuan, who were beside her, noticed her and followed her out. At this time in mid-air, the battle between Li Yundong and Zhang Ling had entered a white-hot stage. Li Yundong had 3 heads and 6 arms, and his defense was impenetrable. Zhang Ling's 4 doppelgangers couldn't penetrate his defense at all, and the other magic she cast was also dispersed by Li Yundong's Mahamudra, which made Zhang Ling gnash her teeth in hatred. In particular, Li Yundong's immovable Wisdom King, who had 3 heads and 6 arms, spoke the mantra, and breathed out 2 qi from his nostrils. It was really like the immovable Wisdom King had descended to the world. When the immovable Wisdom King fundamental seal came out, Zhang Ling didn't even dare to take it. Especially when Li Yundong's palm shot out, the palm print shone with golden light and flew to the horizon, out of sight with the naked eye before disappearing. Such power was really terrifying. The more Zhang Ling fought, the more shocked she became. She thought to herself, "Is this Li Yundong the reincarnation of the immovable Wisdom King? How can he be so powerful?" But she quickly denied this idea. "No, it's impossible. The immovable Wisdom King is a compassionate, wise, and bright king who can control all phenomena. This Li Yundong is so hateful. How can he be the reincarnation of the immovable Wisdom King?" Li Yundong didn't know what Zhang Ling was thinking, but when he saw that Zhang Ling's offensive was getting weaker and weaker, he became more and more excited. The zhenqi all over his body was like a long river, surging endlessly. The Mahamudra from his 6 arms were like cannonballs, so Zhang Ling's 4 doppelgangers couldn't get close. At first, Zhang Ling wanted to rely on her flexible and agile skills to dodge the Mahamudra, thereby consuming Li Yundong's zhenqi. However, she saw that Li Yundong had made hundreds of Mahamudra in a row. Not only did his zhenqi not show any signs of exhaustion, but the Mahamudra was getting fiercer and fiercer, and his zhenqi was getting more and more vigorous. Zhang Ling complained in her heart. For a moment, she regretted fighting with Li Yundong in terms of yang spirit. After cultivators cultivated to the top level of yang spirit, it was difficult to separate their cultivation realms. In terms of realm, Zhang Ling and Li Yundong were both at the top level of yang spirit. But in terms of Shintong and Kung Fu, she was far stronger than Li Yundong, especially in terms of Shintong and Taoist magic. However, Zhang Ling was best at the Shintong of Earth Fire. She could take out the true fire from the 9 earths to fight with her opponent. This was her most powerful Kung Fu, especially when she used her unique skill to take out the Samadhi true fire from the 9 earths. It was a terrifying magic that could burn everything, and even the mantra Mahamudra could not disperse it. However, she was now fighting with Li Yundong in mid-air, and there was no place for her to borrow strength. She couldn't even use the Shintong of Earth Fire, and her other magic had been dispersed by Li Yundong one by one. She couldn't do anything to him at all. Zhang Ling was gritting her teeth in hatred. Her mind was distracted, and suddenly one of the yang spirits dodged a little slower and was caught by Li Yundong. Li Yundong's 6 arms grabbed Zhang Ling's doppelganger and pulled it hard, immediately tearing it apart. Zhang Ling's other 3 doppelgangers suddenly let out a shrill scream, and the doppelganger that had been torn apart by Li Yundong turned into a wisp of green smoke and escaped from Li Yundong's hands. It quickly gathered together and then returned to its original appearance. Zhang Ling roared in pain, "Li Yundong, how dare you hurt my yang spirit?" Li Yundong sneered and said, "If you don't admit defeat, I'll tear you apart until you can never recover." Let's see how much Jinchi you can waste. Zhang Ling roared, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you be so arrogant? Zhang Ling was so angry that she subconsciously wanted to fly back to the ground and use the 9 Earths fire to fight with Li Yundong. But before she could move, she suddenly saw a large dark cloud floating in the sky. The dark clouds above their heads were rolling and thunder and lightning were intertwined. Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were shocked at the same time. They both felt a pair of extremely terrifying and dignified eyes staring at them. Zhang Ling said angrily, Li Yundong, you cheated. How dare you use such a dirty trick? Aren't you afraid of attracting heavenly thunder and hurting innocent people? Li Yundong was also shocked and angry. I didn't attract it. Do you think I'm crazy? Zhang Ling was stunned. If you didn't attract it, then who did? Could it be that someone is trying to reap the benefits? Chapter 4:16. Go to watch net. Just as the two of them were in a state of bewilderment and guessing at each other, Ziyuan suddenly appeared not far away from them. She said in a clear voice, stop guessing. Hurry up and go down. The Yang spirit is flying so high and fighting so fiercely. Are you afraid that heavenly thunder won't strike down? Zhang Ling turned her head and sneered with an unkind look in her eyes. Ziyuan, it's really a pleasant surprise that our Jingyi school has a traitor like you. Li Yundong also snorted. The winner hasn't been decided yet. What if this guy goes back on his word? Zhang Ling said angrily, Li Yundong, in terms of age, I'm older than your parents. In terms of seniority, I'm several generations older than you. How dare you humiliate me like this? Li Yundong also said angrily, since you are older, why did you allow your disciple to provoke and humiliate Ziyuan again and again? Is this how you righteous sects do things? Come. We won't rest until we determine a victor today. Let's see if the heavenly lightning strikes you or me. Zhang Ling was extremely angry. She was about to fight with him again when she saw Zhou Ping, Du Fei, Zheng Yuan, and the others flying up. Watch net. 7 KOM. As soon as Zhou Ping saw Ziyuan, she shouted, do you want to bully us with numbers? Li Yundong sneered, do you think we are like you? Zhou Ping was so angry that she was about to refute. Du Fei, who was beside her, looked at the sky worriedly and advised, Jinren Zhang, Jinren Li, I saw your battle just now. One of you is a famous Taoist and the other is a rising star. This should have been a blessing for our Taoist school. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Moreover, it's a bit unethical to fight under the dark clouds of rolling thunder. I think it's better to stop for the time being. Zheng Yuan also stroked his beard and said with a compassionate expression, Jinren Du is right. I think there's something fishy about this heavenly lightning. Let's give up for now. Li Yundong said flatly, no, you ruined my tea house on the first day of its opening. How can I do business in the future? We must determine the winner today. Zhang Ling also sneered and said, good, I want to see how capable you are, Akalanatha. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight again, the people next to them suddenly became anxious. Ziyuan advised, since there is a notary, why don't we let him decide who wins and who loses? As soon as Ziyuan said this, the faces of Du Fei and Zheng Yuan stiffened. They cursed in their hearts, damn it, this Ziyuan really knows how to push the boat with the current and bring trouble to others. If he had known it would be like this, he wouldn't have joined in the fun and become a notary. Li Yundong turned his head to look at Du Fei, cupped his hands and said, Jinren Du, what do you think? Du Fei looked embarrassed. He thought for a moment, narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. In my opinion, Jinren Li did have the upper hand just now, and one of Jinren Zhang's Yang spirit doppelgangers was destroyed. If the fight continued, it would be difficult to determine the outcome. But judging from the situation just now, Jinren Li should have won. Zhang Ling laughed coldly, great, the Chuanjin dragon sect has finally revealed its fox tail. Well said, Jinren Du. Du Fei cupped his hands and said, Jinren Zhang, I'm just telling the truth. Zhang Ling snorted, turned to look at Zheng Yuan and said coldly, what did Leader Zheng say? Zhang Ling thought to herself, it seems that I won't be able to get away with it today. I offended Zheng Yuan last time, and I'm afraid he will take revenge this time. But just as Zhang Ling was thinking about this, Zheng Yuan said, Jinren Du is wrong. Since it's a battle of methods, how can the outcome be decided by temporary gains and losses? In my opinion, if the fight continues like this, Jinren Zhang will definitely be able to reverse the situation with her profound cultivation foundation and various Shintong Taoist magic. So in my opinion, Jinren Zhang should have won, because her cultivation skills are higher than Jinren Li's. Hearing this, Zhang Ling was both surprised and happy. She thought to herself, did Zheng Yuan not care about the past? Was I wrong about him? Li Yundong was angry in his heart. He sneered and said, Zheng Yuan, I haven't settled the score with you last time. Do you want to die? A glimmer of light flashed in Zheng Yuan's eyes. His face didn't change. He slowly stroked his beard and said, Jinren, what do you mean? I don't understand. I'm just speaking frankly. You can ask the others. In terms of cultivation, who is higher? You or Jinren Zhang? Li Yundong said angrily, will the one with a higher cultivation win? In that case, it shouldn't have been Wu Hao and LV Fengping who died at the foot of the Himalayas, but me. Zheng Yuan suddenly became furious and said with a ferocious face, Li Yundong, what did you say? Li Yundong's words had pierced Zheng Yuan's heart. If Zheng Yuan also joined the battle and the cultivators fought in mid-air, the heavenly thunder would be attracted by their spiritual energy and jinqi, and it would definitely fall faster. If it really fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Zi Yuan immediately said, since the two notaries insist on their own opinions, we should let another notary judge who will win and who will lose. Hearing this, Du Fei immediately said, Jinren Zi Yuan is right. Shen Wankai should be the judge. Zheng Yuan rolled his eyes and nodded in agreement. Zhang Ling sneered and said, he is just a mortal and can't see us fighting. How can he judge the outcome? Zi Yuan said, Jinren Zhang is right, but since he can't see the battle between the two of you, why don't you add another battle that he can see, and then use it as evidence to let him decide the outcome? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He said, Jinren Zhang, you go first. I'll decide the rules for the second round. Zi Yuan's expression didn't change, but she praised Li Yundong's cleverness and tacit understanding in her heart. Zhang Ling was bold and conceited. Seeing that the lightning in the dark clouds above her head was getting fiercer and fiercer, she nodded and said, well, if you have any skills, just say it. After that, her figure flashed and she quickly flew to the ground. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other and quickly flew back. As soon as Li Yundong's yang spirit returned, he saw Zi Yuan and the others walk in one after another. The guests upstairs and downstairs of Desangxian were all staring at him, as if they were waiting for him to make the teacup appear. Li Yundong thought to himself, I can't say that I was evenly matched with Zhang Ling just now, so I have to add another battle. But now everyone is looking at me and wants me to make the teacup come out. What should I say? Li Yundong was thinking, but soon he had an idea. He cupped his hands and said, sorry to keep you waiting. I'll make the teacup come out later. As he said this, he said to Su Chan, Channer, go find a big water jar or a big tea jar. Remember, it must be big, the bigger the better. Su Chan rolled her eyes. Although she didn't know what Li Yundong was going to do, she was very clever and said, it just so happens that I bought a big tea jar before. It happens to come in handy today. As she said this, she ran into the storage room and came out with a tea jar in one hand. Everyone looked at it curiously and was shocked. They saw that the tea jar in Su Chan's hand was as thick as the waist of two strong men, and it reached Su Chan's waist. It was more than 1 meter high. They laughed in surprise and said, how is this a tea jar? This is clearly a rice jar. It's strange. How could there be such a big jar in this tea shop? Su Chan carried the tea jar to the field and put it down easily. The tea jar fell to the ground with a muffled thud. Only then did everyone realize that the tea jar was extremely heavy. They immediately looked at Su Chan in surprise and thought to themselves, how could such a beautiful and lovely girl be so strong? How could she pick up such a big water jar with one hand? It's fine that there are so many beautiful women in Desangxian, but all of them have unique skills? It's amazing, really amazing. When Li Yundong saw the water jar, he nodded to Su Chan and said, go fill the tea jar with water. Su Chan sighed and turned to go into the back room. Zhou Qin, who was beside her, also said, I'll go help too. As soon as she moved, Chao Kefi, who had been watching the field eagerly, also said, I'll go too. Lu Fei rolled her eyes and followed her with a smile. After the beauties entered the back room, Su Chan looked back curiously and asked, why are there so many people here? I can do it alone. Zhou Qin smiled and said, well, you're the only one in the limelight. Can't I help master a little? Su Chan giggled and said, Sister Zhou Qin, help me carry 2 buckets of water later. Chao Kefi and Lu Fei didn't have time to look at the back room of Desangxian. They saw Su Chan and Zhou Qin each fill 2 buckets of water, and then walk out while talking and laughing. The buckets in their hands were deep and thick, and they were probably 20 or 30 kilograms full of water. However, the two of them lifted them as if they were light. Moreover, the water in the buckets didn't ripple, and not a single drop was spilled. Chow Kefi and Lu Feier were amazed. Chow Kefi winked at Lu Feier and said in a low voice, "Did you see that? They are masters, aren't they?" Lu Feier nodded and looked at Su Chan and Zhou Qin in admiration. She whispered, "Look, they're so slim and weak. I didn't expect them to be so strong." Chow Kefi said in a low voice, "This is not just about strength. Look at their buckets full. They walk so fast without spilling any water. This is Kung Fu." Lu Feier exclaimed, "I really don't know how they learned it." Chow Kefi smiled and said, "Didn't you hear Zhou Qin say that she learned it from her master?" Lu Feier asked curiously, "Who is her master?" Chow Kefi laughed and said, "You are a star. How can your observation skills be so poor? Didn't you see that when Zhou Qin talked to Li Yundong she called him master? Of course her master is Li Yundong." Lu Feier blinked her eyes and said, "No way. How old is he? He should be about the same age as me, right?" Chow Kefi smiled and said, "There is no age difference in learning. Those who are capable can be teachers. The disciple is a master, and the master is definitely not inferior. Just watch." Lu Feier made a face and said, "Humph, I'd like to see what he's going to do with such a tank of water and how he's going to change the cup back." Chapter 417. Go to Watch Network. At this time, the guests upstairs and downstairs of Desangxian saw Su Chan and Zhou Qin come out with 2 large buckets and fill the huge teapot at once. "Go to Canwang. 7 km." Li Yundong stood next to the water jar and said in a clear voice, "Everyone watch carefully. Just now, Zhang Ling performed a little trick of making the cup in the teapot disappear without getting close to it. Now I will show you a little trick of sucking up all the water in the teapot without touching it." Shen Wankai smiled and said, "Child Li, this trick of yours has nothing to do with making a teacup. Even if you can drink it all, how can you make the teacup appear?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Shen. After I finish drinking the water in the teapot, it will be Zhang Ling's turn. If she can drink it all, then the teacup won't appear. If she can't drink it all, then the teacup will appear." Shen Wankai was surprised. What kind of logic is this? Strange, it's really strange. Shin Yu, who was standing to one side, sneered, turned his head away and whispered with disdain, "What a trick." However, Shin Hui had seen some of Li Yundong's magic. She watched curiously from the side, and it was rare that she didn't make any sarcastic remarks. At this time the guests upstairs and downstairs were also whispering to each other and discussing. "Hey, what do you think drinking water has to do with making a teacup?" "I don't know. I'm just curious. How can I drink water without touching the teapot?" "Are you stupid? If I don't touch the teapot, can I use a cup?" "That's right. However, even if you drink it with a cup, how can you finish such a big jar of water? Can't you drink it slowly? You can finish it eventually." "Oh, no way. Are we going to watch Child Li drink water slowly here? What's so interesting about this trick? This. Hey, why are you so serious with me? Just watch what Child Li does." Yes. "Hey, no, you're the one who's serious with me." Li Yunyang ignored the crowd and said meaningfully to Zhang Ling, "Jinren Zhang, what do you think?" Zhang Ling frowned inwardly. However, she was extremely conceited. If Li Yundong could do it, she could definitely do it as well. She said proudly, "Let's do as you say." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay." He cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said loudly, "Everyone, please watch carefully." In an instant there was silence in the Desangxian building. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. Li Yunyang stood in front of the big water tank. He took a deep breath and shook his body. A force came from the bottom up, like an old bear shaking off lice. He shook the force to his hands. Li Yundong's hands were 1 foot above the water tank, and then he slowly pushed them as if he was doing Tai Chi. This made everyone have an illusion that the person in front of them was not a person, but a divine dragon that had descended from the 9th heaven. At this time, everyone upstairs and downstairs of Desangxian was shocked. Not only had they never seen anyone who could absorb water in the air, but they had also seen someone who could drink more than half of a vat of water in one breath. Moreover, even if they did not do these 2 things, they had never heard of anyone who could take a breath for 2 minutes without stopping. In the eyes of ordinary people, Li Yundong's continuous breathing for 2 minutes was simply not something that a human could do. No matter how large a person's lung capacity was, it was absolutely impossible for it to be so large. But they didn't know that at this time, Li Yundong's external qi had long been cut off, and it was the internal qi in his body that supported him. As the saying goes, when the mortal breath stops, the Jinqi rises, and it seems to exist unintentionally. It was his powerful Niden that was driving Li Yundong's qi. The Niden in his body was rotating at an astonishing speed, thus driving the Jinqi in his body to flow out continuously. Most people's Niden belonged to the fire attribute, but Li Yundong's Niden had been refined by the power of thunder and lightning when he had built the Zhuji phase in the Himalayas. It was born with the attribute of thunder and lightning, so it could be called a thunder-fire Niden. Thunder originated from water, and fire could quickly evaporate and dissolve water into steam. Therefore, the water that Li Yundong had absorbed into his body was quickly dissolved by his Niden into a large amount of water vapor, which then evaporated from the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. After another minute, the water tank was about to be bottomed out. Everyone saw white steam rising from the top of Li Yundong's head. A white line rushed straight to the roof and quickly spread out and rolled like 3 mist flowers. It was as if 3 flowers had gathered above one's head. In the mist, Li Yundong's clothes and black hair fluttered without any wind. He was really like an immortal with great magical power, which was awe-inspiring. After an unknown period of time, Li Yundong suddenly sucked up the last drop of water in the water tank. Only then did everyone let out a sigh of relief. It was as if the past few minutes had been as long as centuries. They all looked at Li Yundong in a daze and couldn't say a word, as if what had just happened had exceeded their imagination. The shop of Desanxian was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Li Yundong didn't touch the tank and sucked up all the water in it. His stomach didn't bulge and his body didn't look cumbersome or heavy at all. He lifted the water tank with one hand and turned it upside down. Then he turned it around and showed it to the people around him, showing them that there was no drop of water left in the tank. At this time, people seemed to wake up from a dream and let out an earth-shattering cheer. The sound almost lifted the roof. The celebrities sitting on the second floor were so excited that they applauded like thunder. They whispered to each other, "This is incredible. This is not a trick. This is obviously an immortal. Immortal, this is definitely an immortal." Someone else shouted, "Immortal Li, one more." Lu Feier was so excited that her little hands turned red, but she didn't know it. Chow Kefi was still able to control herself. She applauded elegantly and politely, but her elbow was hitting Lu Feier hard and she kept saying, "How is it? Is it a master? Is it a master?" Lu Feier admired Li Yundong to the extreme in her heart and kept applauding, but she was a little unconvinced by Chow Kefi and said, "The teacup hasn't come out yet." Yin Mingfan looked at Li Yundong strangely, and from time to time she looked at Shen Wankai, Shen Yu and Shen Hui, who were so shocked that they couldn't speak. There was a thoughtful look in her eyes. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others also looked at each other with strong joy and admiration in their eyes. They were all knowledgeable people, and they knew how terrifying it was for Li Yundong to be able to do this. Not only them, but even Jing Yuan and Du Fei looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look on their faces. Ding Nan also looked at Li Yundong in shock, and there was a strong sense of worship and admiration in her eyes. Although Zhou Ping had seen Li Yundong's ability several times, Li Yundong's move today made her hair stand on end. She naturally knew how strong and condensed Jinqi was to be able to do this. How terrifying and powerful was his Niden to be able to break down so much water in an instant. Zhou Ping glanced at her master uneasily, only to see Zhang Ling staring at Li Yundong with an extremely ugly expression. She didn't say a word. After a long time, she narrowed her eyes slightly, as if she had made a major decision. Li Yundong turned around to let everyone see that there was indeed no water left in the water jar. He turned around and was about to speak to Zhang Ling, but suddenly, a teacup fell from the air. The speed at which the teacup fell was so fast that it almost seemed that someone had deliberately thrown it to the ground in exasperation. Li Yundong was quick to react. His body spun like a top, and he put the teacup on the ground with one hand. He lowered his other hand like a monkey fishing for the moon. His wrist turned softly and his palm caught the teacup firmly. Everyone saw a flash of white light, and an object shaped like a teacup quickly fell from mid-air. Then Li Yundong's body spun. When he stood up again, he was holding a teacup in one hand and standing proudly with the other behind his back. Li Yundong said loudly, "Everyone please look. I've changed the teacup back." At this moment, everyone felt as if they were watching a Hollywood blockbuster. The ups and downs made them breathless. It was only at this moment that they could finally exhale all of their breaths, put down all the stones in their hearts and cheered loudly. Li Yundong held the teacup high and said to Zheng Yuan and Du Fei, "Do you want to see if it's the original teacup?" Zheng Yuan and Du Fei were both shocked by Li Yundong's move just now and shook their heads. Li Yundong turned around again and said to Chen Wankai, "Mr. Shen, do you want to have a look?" Chen Wankai walked up trembling with excitement. He looked at Li Yundong as if he was looking at a living immortal. He held the teacup in Li Yundong's palm with both hands and looked at it carefully. Then he shouted, "Yes, yes, this is the teacup." Chen Wankai was extremely excited. He gave a thumbs up and said loudly, "I, Chen Wankai, have traveled all over the world and seen countless strange people, but Child Li, you are the most powerful one I have ever seen. I, Chen Wankai, am convinced." At this time, the outcome of the battle was self-evident. Zhang Ling snorted coldly. She knew that she didn't have such a long Jinqi aura. Unless she used magic, she couldn't absorb water with Jinqi like Li Yundong did. Her face was ugly and she walked out without saying a word. Seeing that the situation was not good, Zhou Ping immediately followed her out. When they left, Zhao Yuzhen of the tea house of Zhao had already been helped up by the beautiful women in Changsam, but he was still standing there like a stone statue. Before Zhou Ping left, she glanced at her and secretly cursed in her heart, "If it weren't for the fact that this useless thing is so incompetent, why would we have to force our way out?" When the two of them left the Desanxian shop, they could still hear the people inside cheering loudly, especially the cheers of Li Yundong's classmates. Zhang Ling felt that these voices were extremely harsh. She said to Zhou Ping with a livid face, "No matter what means you use, you have to find a way to get the Heavenly Jindan technique for me." Zhou Ping was stunned for a moment. "The Heavenly Jindan technique?" Zhang Ling said angrily, "Are you deaf? If Li Yundong hadn't practiced the Heavenly Jindan technique, how could his qi be so long and his Niden be so powerful? Now he is already so strong at the 8th stage. If he breaks through to the 9th stage in the future, will there still be a place for us in the world?" Vote for recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 418. Go to WatchNet. As soon as Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping left, the people upstairs and downstairs of Desanxian fell into jubilation. Zheng Yuan, who had been against Li Yundong before, also cupped his hands and said to Li Yundong with a smile on his face, "Congratulations on the successful opening of Jinren Li's tea house." "Congratulations." Li Yundong glanced at him and said coldly, "Thank you very much. Go to WatchNet. 7 KOM. At this time, Ding Nan also said to Li Yundong with mixed feelings, "Li Yundong, I know you have some opinions about me, but no matter what, we used to be classmates. For the sake of our former classmates, I wish you a prosperous business and a lot of money." Hearing this, Li Yundong also felt a myriad of emotions in his heart. He looked at the tall girl in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes, sighed and said, "Ding Nan, I know I can't persuade you now. But, alas, you're on your own." Ding Nan's eyes darkened. She lowered her head as if she didn't want Li Yundong to see the feelings in her eyes. She said in a low voice, "Then I'll go first." After that she walked away quickly. Zheng Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said to Li Yundong meaningfully, "Jinren Li, your relationship with my beloved disciple is quite good?" Although Li Yundong didn't know why Ding Nan had become Zheng Yuan's disciple, he guessed that there must be some secret reasons. He also knew that Zheng Yuan was a cunning and ruthless person, so he deliberately said vaguely, "There is no hatred in this world that can't be let go, and there is no grievance that can't be solved. What's more, your disciple has a good relationship with me in the past." "What's wrong? Leader Zheng, is there something you can't figure out?" Zheng Yuan said with a fake smile, "It's nothing, Jinren Li. The Taoist assembly will be held in a month. We'll meet again." After that, he cupped his hands and left with a flick of his sleeves. For a moment, Ding Nan couldn't help showing her true feelings in front of Li Yundong, but after she left, she secretly regretted it. She was very clear about Zheng Yuan's thoughts and means. If she revealed a flaw and let him know that she was not LV Fengping, she would definitely die. Ding Nan didn't go far before she stopped. When Zheng Yuan came up to her, she whispered, "Master, I'm sorry." Zheng Yuan put his hands behind his back and said lightly, "Oh? Where did that come from?" Ding Nan said in a low voice, "I know you will overthink what I said just now, Master, but I have no choice." Zheng Yuan said indifferently, "Oh?" Ding Nan said with tears in her eyes, "Master, you've seen it. This Li Yundong is too strong. I really don't dare to hope that I can succeed in my revenge. I just hope that you won't have any enmity with him in the future. If this strong man comes and kills you again, then I will have no one to rely on in this world." Ding Nan had been rolling around Zhou Qin's side for a long time, so her acting skills had long been honed to perfection. When she cried, she really looked like a pear blossom in the rain, which made people feel sorry for her. Jing Yuan's face, which had been tense, suddenly relaxed. He said, "You don't have to talk to him so affectionately. Those who don't know might think, humph." Ding Nan continued, "Master, in this way, we can numb Li Yundong and relax his vigilance. Secondly, we may resolve the grudge between him and us. If something happens in the future, we will have a strong ally." Jing Yuan nodded slightly. "You're right. Li Yundong's cultivation speed is really terrifying. I have lived for so many years, but I have never seen such a powerful young man. If he is a friend and not an enemy, it will be a great thing." Ding Nan couldn't help but feel happy, but soon Jing Yuan changed the topic and said, "But do you think Li Yundong is a fool? Do you think you can turn an enemy into a friend by saying these words?" Ding Nan cursed in her heart, "This old pervert is really hard to fool." Ding Nan sobbed softly again and said, "Master, this body of mine used to be Li Yundong's classmate, and our relationship was quite deep. He didn't know that I had already occupied the body of his former classmate, so he didn't know the secret and thought that I was his classmate. I knew this, so I said those words boldly, but I didn't expect that it would make you doubt me. Please punish me." After that, Ding Nan was about to kneel down. Although Jing Yuan was cruel and merciless, he was also a person who cherished flowers. He stopped her with a hand and said with a smile, "There are so many people here. What are you doing? Let's go. Since you don't have such thoughts, I won't doubt you. But if you have any ideas in the future, you should tell me in advance. Otherwise it will be bad if there is a gap between master and disciple." Ding Nan smiled through her tears and said, "Thank you for your magnanimity, master." Jing Yuan smiled and took Ding Nan's hand. "Let's go back. The Taoist assembly will be held in a month. I have to prepare well then." Ding Nan felt goosebumps all over her body when Jing Yuan held her hand, but she couldn't shake it off, so she forced herself to smile and said, "I hope you can show your power at the Taoist assembly and suppress all the heroes." Jing Yuan couldn't help laughing when he heard this. As he touched Ding Nan's hand, he said with a smile, "I need your help." Ding Nan was extremely disgusted. She forced a smile, but in her heart she thought, "This lecture is going too far. I have to think of a way." Although Jing Yuan's face was also full of smiles, there was still a trace of doubt in his heart. "Pinger has been a little strange since she took possession of me. Although she said that today, I still feel that it's a little strange. No, I have to test her again when I have a chance in the future." The two of them talked and laughed happily along the way, but in secret they had their own thoughts and ulterior motives. In De Sanxian's shop, Li Yundong suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention. The reason why many celebrities from all walks of life had come to attend the opening ceremony of this small tea house was all for the sake of the Zhou family. If the Zhou family had not recovered, Zhou Qin would not have been able to ask these people to come even if she had knocked her head. But now that the Zhou family had made a comeback, these people had come uninvited. In the officialdom, there was nothing more hypocritical than this. At the beginning, many of them had subconsciously regarded Li Yundong as half a son-in-law of the Zhou family. Therefore, although they were polite, they had never thought in their hearts, "This lucky guy has climbed up a high branch, a guy who lives off women," and so on. But now it seemed that they were all looking at Li Yundong with new eyes and were shocked. Only then did some people understand what it meant when Zhou Qin respectfully called Li Yundong master. It turned out that this overly young boy was really a great master. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with excitement and fanaticism. She grabbed Chow Kefi's clothes hard and said anxiously, Sister Chow, this guy is really a master. He's so tall." Chow Kefi also looked at Li Yundong in awe. She had known that Li Yundong was a strange person, but in her opinion he was a master of kung fu. However, she hadn't expected that Li Yundong's kung fu would far exceed her expectations and imagination. It had already gone beyond the scope of human beings and was awe-inspiring. Chow Kefi was pulled away by Lu Feier. She withdrew her gaze from Li Yundong and scolded with a smile, "Are you convinced now?" Lu Feier nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. I'm convinced. How did he do it?" Chow Kefi smiled and said, "I don't know. Why don't you ask him?" Lu Feier's eyes lit up at first, but when she remembered Li Yundong's attitude towards her before, her face suddenly fell. "Humph, this guy not only has eyes on the top of his head, but he's also short-sighted. He doesn't care about me." Chow Kefi covered her mouth and laughed. "Oh, even a big star is useless?" Lu Feier said angrily, "Sister Chow, I'm kind enough to accompany you out. How can you laugh at me like this?" Chow Kefi laughed and said, It's obvious that you want to skip work. You even threw your agent aside and turned off your cell phone, didn't you? Humph, I'll see what you can do when you turn on your cell phone later. Lu Fair said with a smile. Who told her to be so strict with me all day long? Let her be anxious. Humph. But Sister Chow, you can't do this. At least let me figure out what's going on. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep tonight. Chow Kefi snorted and said, I can't help it. Although he is young, he has a lot of ideas in his mind. Didn't you see that I was frantically looking for him a while ago? This heartless thing actually disappeared without saying a word. It's useless to beg such a person. Lu Fair looked disappointed. If I had known this would happen, I might as well not have come. Isn't he just trying to make me depressed? Yin Ming Fan, who was standing to one side, suddenly smiled and said, Lu Fair, don't worry. I guess my uncle will ask Li Yundong to be Xin Yu and Xin Hui's teacher in a while. Chow Kefi asked curiously, how do you know? Yin Ming Fan looked at Xin Hui, then turned her head to Chow Kefi and said with a smile, Xin Hui secretly told me that the old master wanted to invite Zi Yuan and Li Yundong to be Xin Yu and Xin Hui's family teachers. I think the old master brought them both here today. It's very likely that he wants to worship them in public. Lu Fair couldn't help but interrupt. What does that have to do with me? Yin Ming Fan said with a smile, Xin Hui and Xin Yu are both your fans. If Li Yundong accepts them as students, you can save the country in a roundabout way and find out what's going on from the two of them. Lu Fair laughed and said, that's a good idea. But will Li Yundong accept them as disciples? Chow Kefi smiled and said, I think so. Old Master Xin has a lot of influence. While they were talking, Xin Wankai quickly calmed down after his excitement. He said very seriously and sincerely, Young Master Li, the last time we parted in Dongwu City, I was very impressed by the demeanor of you and Miss Zi Yuan. I admired you very much. I wanted to visit you as soon as possible, but I couldn't find your whereabouts. Yesterday, I accidentally heard that young Master Li was going to open a tea house in Tianan City. I was pleasantly surprised, so I came uninvited. On the one hand, I wanted to congratulate the opening, and on the other. As he said this, he pulled Xin Yu and Xin Hui, who looked reluctant behind him, forward and said, This is my son and my daughter. I believe that young Master Li also knows my son. Haha, he and young Master Li also had some misunderstandings before, but I believe that young Master Li is magnanimous and will not care about it. Moreover, young people don't get to know each other without fighting. As for my daughter, Xin Wankai looked at Xin Hui, but the baby-faced girl suddenly snorted and turned her face away. She didn't buy his words at all. The smile on Xin Wankai's face froze, but he quickly smiled and said, This girl is still shy. Li Yundong smiled slightly and didn't answer Xin Wankai's words. He just looked at him calmly, not at all flattered. Xin Yu saw this and snorted in his heart. In his opinion, what kind of person was his father Xin Wankai? He was a person who would tremble everywhere in Tianan City if he stamped his feet. He came to ask Li Yundong to be his teacher, which was to give Li Yundong a lot of face. That was to be courteous. But this fellow, he only knew a little trick and was putting on airs. Humph, what's the big deal? Xin Wankai didn't know what his son was thinking. He smiled and said to Li Yundong, I believe that young Master Li also knows my daughter. I have a presumptuous request. I hope young Master Li will do me a favor. At this time, Li Yundong had already guessed that Xin Wankai wanted him to accept Xin Yu and Xin Hui as his disciples, but he also muttered in his heart, accepting disciples is not like buying cabbages in the market. Moreover, Xin Hui has always been against me. If I accept her as my disciple, wouldn't the world be in chaos? Moreover, Xin Yu's character was quite bad and he really didn't like him. How could he accept him? But if he didn't accept him, Li Yundong didn't know how to make Xin Wankai step down. He hesitated for a moment and only hoped that Xin Wankai wouldn't say that he wanted to be his disciple. Xin Wankai then said, Young Master Li, can you accept my son and my daughter as your disciples? I don't want to learn anything else. I just want to be able to follow you and pour tea. I want to learn from you, young Master Li, who is indifferent to favors and insults, and has a deep and profound cultivation skill. That's enough. Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart when he heard this. He thought to himself, sure enough, here it comes. Should I accept them or not? Vote recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Raising a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Raising a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Raising a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. He pushed Shen Hui away and said angrily, "Who asked you to pretend to persuade me? I don't need you to care about me." With that he turned around and ran. The entourage who had followed Chen Wankai saw that something was wrong and subconsciously wanted to chase after him, but Chen Wankai shouted in a deep voice, "Don't chase after him. Let him go. If you have the guts, don't enter the house." The entourage stood there awkwardly. He looked at Shin Yu's back and then at Chen Wankai like a clay puppet. Chen Wansai's face was livid. He looked at Shen Hui meaningfully and said lightly, "You persuaded me well." Although Shen Hui smiled, she shivered in her heart. She thought to herself, "It's over. I'm going to be punished by the old master again this time. Humph, it's all Li Yundong's fault. Every time I meet him, nothing good happens. Damn it, damn it." Chen Wankai hadn't expected that the matter he had been so confident in would turn out like this. Although he felt that he had lost face, he still forced a smile and said to Li Yundong, "Child Li, my son has not been disciplined well. I've made a fool of myself." Li Yundong secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "It's normal for young people to be arrogant and full of vigor." Chen Wankai sighed and said in a very old manner, "Child Li is young and magnanimous. I have never seen such a person in my life. Just now, I was lucky enough to witness Child Li's divine skill. It was really amazing. It's a pity that the scene was not right. Otherwise, I would have had a few drinks with Child Li. Today I'll go first. Child Li, I wish you a prosperous business and a prosperous future." After that, Chen Wankai didn't look around. He just cupped his hands to Li Yuanbo upstairs and said, "Secretary Li, goodbye." Li Yuanbo smiled and raised his teacup to him as a salute. Feng Na, who had been watching the show from the side, saw the old man leave with his daughter. In this room of dignitaries, he only greeted Secretary Li and ignored everyone else. She secretly stuck out her tongue and whispered, "How bold he is. He even ignored the mayor." Ching Ching laughed in a low voice and said, "So what if he's bold? Isn't he still begging Li Yundong?" Feng Na sighed softly and looked at Li Yundong with admiration in her eyes. "When I first saw him at school, I knew that he was not an ordinary person. But now more than half a year has passed, and he has become a person that I don't even dare to recognize. I wonder what he will become in another 6 months." Ching Ching smiled and said, "What else can he do? Is he no longer our classmate or friend after he becomes the President of the United States? Li Yundong is not the kind of person who can't be reached just because he is rich." Feng Na nodded and said with a smile, "That's his charm. Look at the people he's talking to now. You can see that his realm has made us look up to him, but he still doesn't put on any airs and jokes when he wants to." The two of them whispered. At this time Li Yuanbo, who was upstairs, looked at his watch, then got up and said with a smile, "It's getting late. Today I've broadened my horizons and watched a good show. This trip was really worth it. I'll go first." As soon as he moved, the guests upstairs all got up to see him off. Li Yuanbo came downstairs, shook hands with Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Xiaoli, your kung fu is a bit shocking. How did you practice it?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I was just practicing for fun." Seeing that Li Yundong was unwilling to tell him, Li Yuanbo also smiled and said, "Well, I'll go back and practice blindly. Let's see if I can make any progress." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Ha, Secretary Li, you must be joking." Li Yuanbo laughed and let go of Li Yundong's hand. Then he said to Zhou Qin, who was next to him, Qin, will you see me off?" Although Zhou Qin was a little surprised, she quickly smiled and said, "Okay, Uncle Li." Li Yuanbo nodded and turned to leave. He didn't get in his car, but just walked slowly on the pedestrian street with his hands behind his back. Seeing that he wasn't getting in the car, the driver who had come with him had to drive slowly behind him. After a while, Li Yuanbo suddenly stopped and played with the file he had taken from Li Yundong. He smiled and said to Zhou Qin meaningfully, Qin, tell me honestly, what are you learning from Li Yundong?" Zhou Qin was stunned. Although her words were sharp and her mind was quick, she didn't know how to answer for a moment. Li Yuanbo stared at her closely and said, "You don't want to tell me? Well, I'll tell you." Li Yuanbo raised his head and said leisurely, "He's a cultivator, isn't he?" Zhou Qin was shocked. "Uncle Li, are you spying on him?" Li Yuanbo chuckled. "How dare this bold guy play such a trick in front of me? Does he think I can't tell?" Zhou Qin asked nervously, "Uncle Li, in fact, Li Yundong is not what you think." Li Yuanbo didn't wait for her to finish. He raised his hand and interrupted her, saying, "Don't be nervous. I have no prejudice against cultivators. Moreover, the destruction of the 4 olds and the 10 years of turmoil in the country had also caused great damage to the cultivation world. The older generation felt very apologetic, so they had turned a blind eye to the development of the cultivation world over the years. But you have to tell him not to cross the line by playing with fire. Something like young master he must not happen again. Otherwise, no one will be able to protect him. Zhou Qin was relieved and said with a smile, Uncle Li, don't worry. He won't. Li Yuanbo saw that although Li Yundong was young, he was also well-behaved and quite calm. As he spoke, he also let Zhou Qin change the topic to warn Li Yundong. He nodded slightly, smiled and said, How long have you been with him? This sentence was a little ambiguous. Zhou Qin's cheeks turned slightly red and she whispered, About a month. Li Yuanbo looked at Zhou Qin and sighed softly. You can cultivate so fast in a month. Has there been such a big change? Zhou Qin looked at herself in a daze. Have I changed a lot? Li Yuanbo shook his head and said with a smile, You really don't know the true face of Mount Lushan. Compared with your former self, it's like you've been reborn. I don't know which sex cultivation method Li Yundong is cultivating. How can he make progress so fast? I met some old comrades and they. At this point, Li Yuanbo suddenly realized that he had said something wrong. He immediately shut his mouth and changed the topic. Hey, don't practice some crooked kung fu with him. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to your father. Zhou Qin was a little confused at first, but she quickly reacted. Her cheeks turned red and she said angrily, Uncle Li, how can you be so disrespectful? What are you talking about? Li Yunbo laughed and said, Forget it. Go ahead and go your own way. Alas, you don't want to take the road of politics, but you want to take such a difficult and dangerous road. Zhou Qin smiled sweetly and said, Uncle Li, as the saying goes, infinite glory lies in the dangerous peak. Moreover, cultivation is the most inspirational thing in the world. There are not so many troubles of intrigue and deception. You can also jump out of the mortal world and get rid of old age, illness, and death. Why not? Li Yuanbo sighed in his heart when he heard this. Yes, if you can jump out of the mortal world and get rid of old age, illness, and death, why not? Zhou Qin saw that Li Yuanbo's temples were gray, which was obviously due to his hard work. She whispered tentatively, Uncle Li, do you want me to secretly teach you some cultivation kung fu in the future? When Li Yuanbo heard this, he immediately waved his hand and said, No, there are rules in the system. We are atheists. You can't hurt me. Anyone who has anything to do with these things will be removed. Those who have anything to do with cultivation are all nominal positions. If people like us have anything to do with it, we will die. Zhou Qin sighed and said, What is this? You might as well not be an official. Li Yuanbo laughed and sighed. It's easy to go up the mountain, but it's difficult to go down. When you climb to a certain height, it's not up to you to decide whether you can go down or not. Forget it, it's getting late. I should go back. As he said this, he turned and walked to his car. Zhou Qin looked at his old back and suddenly asked, Uncle Li, if you had to choose from the beginning, which path would you choose? Li Yuanbo stopped and was silent for a while. He turned around and said with a smile, The affairs of the mortal world are in chaos. How can I be at ease? Envy is returned to herding horses to the southern mountain. After that, Li Yuanbo turned around and left laughing. Chapter 420. Go to watch net. When Li Yuanbo's car was far away, Zhou Qin came to her senses and slowly walked back. Watch net. 7 km. At this time, most of the guests in Desangxian had left. Li Yundong saw that the students who had come to support him had all left. At this time there were only the people from the Fox Zen School, Ziyuan, and the others left in the store. Feng Na, Ching Ching, Chao Kefi, Lu Feier, and Yin Mingfan who had stayed for the time being. There were more than a dozen people in total. Although the number of people wasn't small, it was much quieter compared to the situation where the upper and lower floors were filled with people. Li Yundong looked around and saw that after everyone had left, there were leftover fruit peels and shells everywhere on the ground. The teacups on the tea table were messy and the scene was a mess. Li Yundong clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. He smiled and said, Well, the opening ceremony is finally over. Let's clean up later. Maybe there will be more guests coming later. After he finished speaking, Ziyuan took the lead to clean up the teacups on the table. As soon as she moved, Ruan Hongling followed suit. Suchan also followed suit. Then, everyone in the Fox Zen School began to move. Feng Na and Ching Ching smiled and said, Let's help too. At this time only Chao Kefi, Yin Mingfan, and Lu Feier were left sitting at the table with nothing to do. Chao Kefi said awkwardly, I'll help too. Li Yundong smiled and said, Forget it, President Chow. Just sit down. You're a guest. How can you be so busy? Chow Kefi smiled and didn't insist. Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, had been curiously looking at Li Yunyang's belly. Finally, she couldn't help but ask, Immortal Li, can I ask you a question? Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay, but if you ask me where I hid the jar of water, then you'd better not speak. Lu Feier's thoughts were exposed. She immediately said angrily, You're so annoying. How do you know what I'm going to ask? Li Yundong laughed heartily. You've been staring at my stomach all this time. If I still don't understand, then wouldn't I be stupid? Besides, you call me immortal. Of course I have to act like one. In the past, no matter where she went, Lu Feier had always been held in high regard. No matter how outstanding and proud a man was, he had to be polite to her. Li Yundong, on the other hand, had ignored her and even made fun of her. It was really unbearable. Uncle could not bear it, but Aunt could not bear it. Lu Feier was angry and said, Do you know everything? Li Yundong had defeated Zhang Ling, and the opening ceremony had been unprecedentedly lively and successful. He was in a good mood. Shaking his head, he said with a smile, I wouldn't dare. But I know everything about astronomy and English. I know the origin of civilization for 5,000 years, and I know 22 years from now. Lu Feier snorted and said, No, there are so many beautiful women around him. How could it be my turn? As she said this, she pointed to Ziyuan, who had walked up to Li Yundong and said, Look at this. This is simply the 7 fairies descending to earth. She has such a good temperament, is so beautiful, and is actually so virtuous. Is this Li Yundong the reincarnation of Dong Yong? Chow Kefi also looked at Ziyuan with jealousy. She did not speak for a long time, and after a long time she sighed softly. At this time, Ziyuan whispered to Li Yundong in a voice that only the two of them could hear, Li Yundong, have you found anything strange? The smile on Li Yundong's face didn't change, but he said, I found a little, but I don't know if it's the same as what you found. Ziyuan said in a low voice, Did you notice that Chao Yi and Zhuang Yiting said that Chow Kefi looked like someone they knew? However, Lu Yuehong and Su Chan said that Chow Kefi was very familiar, but they couldn't tell who she looked like. Don't you think it's a little strange? Li Yundong whispered, It's a little strange, but it doesn't mean anything. What I'm curious about is why Chao Yi and Zhuang Yiting's statements are the same. Ziyuan thought for a while and said, I don't know. We'll just pay more attention. Li Yundong said, Well, I'll keep an eye on it. However, the most important thing right now is to get Desangxian on the right track. After we solve the problem of making money, we can talk about other things. Ziyuan smiled and said, Today is a good start. I believe that the business of Desangxian will not be a problem. Li Yundong nodded and said, I'm also confident. The two of them whispered for a while. During this time, Feng Na, Ching Cheng, and the people of the Fox Zen School had already cleaned up the upstairs and downstairs. Feng Na saw Li Yundong standing to one side and talking to Ziyuan, so she said with a smile, Li Yundong, are you really an immortal? An idle immortal, or simply an idler for short? Only then did Li Yundong realize that they had finished their work. He laughed and said, Is it all done? Well, let's get ready to open for business later. As he spoke, Li Yundong walked to the middle of the first floor of the tea house. With one hand on his waist and the other waving, he said energetically, Comrades, today's opening ceremony of Desangxian is grand, successful, perfect, and victorious. On behalf of the chairman of Desangxian International Company Limited and all the employees, I would like to express my sincere condolences to everyone for their hard work. When he said these words, everyone kept chuckling. Seeing that the opening ceremony of Li Yundong's tea house was so successful, Su Chan beamed with joy and was the first to take the lead in applauding. The little foxes immediately followed suit. Feng Na and Ching Ching also laughed and said loudly, It's not hard on us. The leader has worked hard. Li Yundong was happy. He also pretended to stretch out his hand like a leader, pressed it down and said, Well, although the leader has worked hard, the comrades have worked harder. Seeing that Li Yundong was making fun of them, everyone laughed in unison. Chow Kefi saw Lu Feier holding her cheeks and looking at Su Chan and the others with envy in her eyes. She said softly, Are you jealous? Lu Feier said softly, Well, this person is so fun. I envy them so much. They must live happily every day, unlike me who has to run around all day and struggle for fame and fortune. Alas, this kind of life may seem very glamorous to others, but in fact it's boring. Li Yundong didn't know what Chow Kefi and Lu Feier were saying. He continued to say seriously, In view of everyone's good performance today, I have decided to reward you well after today. As soon as he finished speaking, the little foxes raised their hands at the same time and laughed loudly. Long live the leader. Su Chan's eyes lit up and she asked, "Are you going out to eat and drink?" The little foxes also asked at once, "Are you going out to buy new clothes? Can I buy a new bag? I want to buy a pair of new shoes." Li Yundong was angry when he heard this. He quickly stretched out his hands and pretended to be angry. You haven't earned a penny yet, and you're already thinking about how to squander money. How can you do that? Ruan Hongling also joined in and said, "Li Yundong, you just said that you would reward us. Now you're going back on your word. Isn't that too unkind?" The little foxes said in unison, "That's right, it's too unkind." Their crisp shouts made the passers-by outside the shop look in one after another, their eyes full of envy and jealousy. Li Yundong was a little overwhelmed. He turned his head to look at Ziyuan and glared at her. "Hey, you're also a major shareholder. At least say something." Ziyuan smiled and said, "What major shareholder? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at in front of President Chao and President Yin? Besides, you said it yourself just now. Don't look at me." Li Yundong said with an exaggerated expression, "You actually defected to the enemy at the last minute. Are you kidding me?" Su Chan and the others burst out laughing. At this time Zhou Qin also came back. As soon as Li Yundong saw her, he immediately said, "Zhou Qin, you came at the right time. Now that we haven't earned a penny, these girls are thinking about eating and drinking. They even want to buy clothes and bags. Don't you think it's too much?" Zhou Qin was suddenly amused. She said with a smile, "Too much, too much. How can they think about eating, drinking, and wearing clothes when they haven't earned a penny?" Li Yundong was overjoyed and said proudly to the little foxes, "Did you hear that? This is what an experienced strategist would say." Zhou Qin rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "However, when we make money today we can go eat, drink, and wear clothes again. For eating we should go to Shangri-La. For dressing we should go to Chanel V. For dressing we should go to Cartier Tiffany." Li Yundong gasped when he heard this. "Wow, they're all from the world's top brands. Are you trying to make me go bankrupt?" As he said this, he walked over to Chao Kefi's table, stretched out his hand and said, "President Chao, can I borrow your eyebrow pencil?" Chao Kefi was covering her mouth and snickering. When she saw Li Yundong asking for an eyebrow pencil, she picked up her small bag, rummaged through the makeup bag and took out an eyebrow pencil. She smiled and said, "What do you want this for?" Li Yundong said angrily, "Just give it to me quickly." When he took the eyebrow pencil, he faced the crowd and used it to draw the position of the 5 internal organs on the clothes. He said with a roguish expression, "How much do you think I can sell for? You can go and spend as much as you think I can. I can also make a contribution to the GP exhibition of our motherland. How about that?" When everyone saw that Li Yundong was acting like a scoundrel, without the slightest immortal demeanor from before, they all laughed. Ziyuan laughed and scolded, "Look at you. What's the difference between you and a hooligan?" Li Yundong was done joking. He smiled and threw the eyebrow pencil back to Chao Kefi, who was laughing so hard that she was lying on the table. He said, "Forget it, let's stop joking. Let's get to work. If business is good today, I'll treat everyone to delicious food and drinks." Su Chan and the little foxes immediately cheered in unison, "Hooray! We'll have delicious food and drinks." Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, whispered, "Master, don't you know how much they can eat? Aren't you afraid of going broke?" Li Yundong said with a straight face, "Let's go to the buffet. I'm happy today so I don't care about my old face anymore." Zhou Qin suddenly burst out laughing. "You shameless girl, but I do. I won't go." Li Yundong scolded her with a smile, "You stinky girl, you're my disciple. Not only did you complain, but you also took the lead in singing the opposite tune. Come on, go to your work. There will be no guests later. I'll see how happy you are." Zhou Qin snorted and said, Ba, you jinx. There will be a lot of customers later." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Thank you for your kind words." The group of people had enough of the war of words, and they had all finished the opening celebration. At this time they slowly settled down and prepared to do business. However, after waiting in the shop for a while, Li Yundong and the others saw a bustling crowd outside. There were a lot of people coming in, but no one came in to drink tea. What made Li Yundong even more puzzled was that until the afternoon, not a single customer came in. A few people wanted to come in to drink tea, but after taking a look inside, they immediately turned their heads and left in a hurry, as if the room was full of monsters. However, a few people went in to drink tea at Zhao's tea house, which made Zhao Yujin, who had been in a daze, come back to his senses. Li Yundong was puzzled and asked, "Is this salted fish going to turn over? Why is there no one in our shop?" Ziyuan frowned slightly and remained silent. Su Chan and the others also looked at each other, confused. Why was there no one in her shop, but there were people in Zhao Yogan's shop opposite? What was the reason? Children, it's New Year's Eve. Happy New Year. I wish all my readers a Happy New Year. May everything go well in the new year. Ah. Chapter 421. Go to CNET. Li Yundong and the others were still immersed in the successful and warm opening ceremony, but they hadn't expected that they would soon be greeted by a scene of sparrows at the door. Go to CNET. Although there were also officials of Tianan City who had heard the news and come to congratulate them, these people were not guests. After giving gifts, they turned around and left. Li Yundong frowned and said, "What's going on? Why are there no guests?" He looked at Ziyuan and asked, "What happened?" Ziyuan thought for a moment and shook her head. "I don't know yet." Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin again and asked, "Miss Zhou, do you know?" She shook her head and comforted him, "Master, don't worry. There's no hurry to do business." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You're right, but there shouldn't be no guests at all, right? On the first day of the opening, there are many celebrities from all walks of life, but there isn't a single guest. What's going on?" Lu Fair suddenly raised her hand and said loudly, "Who said there are no guests? Am I not human? Waiter, hurry up and serve tea." Li Yundong turned his face and said to Su Chan with a smile, "I'm calling you. Hurry up and serve tea." She gracefully came to Chow Kefi's table and asked with a sweet smile, "Sisters, what kind of tea would you like?" Lu Fair wanted to tease Li Yundong, so she deliberately said with a straight face, "You are not the waiter. Let the waiter pour tea." Su Chan blinked and looked back at Li Yundong. Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. It turned out that this girl was still holding a grudge. He snorted and said, "There is no waiter here." Chow Kefi secretly kicked Lu Fair under the table and whispered with a smile, "Hey, don't make trouble." Lu Fair deliberately pretended not to notice. She still raised her face and said leisurely, "Well, no one here knows why business is bad. I'm the only one who knows. It's really embarrassing." Hearing this, Li Yundong immediately trotted over to Lu Fair, bowed and said with a smile, "Sir, the waiter is here. What would you like to drink?" Everyone burst into laughter. Ruan Hongling laughed and scolded, "You're the store manager. How embarrassing." Li Yundong turned his face and said with a fierce face, "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm working hard to make money for you prodigals, aren't I?" After that, he turned his head and said with a face full of smiles, "Sir, don't pay attention to this kind of person. What would you like to drink? I'll prepare it for you right away." Lu Fair tried hard to hold back her laughter. She thought for a moment and said, "I want to drink oolong tea." Li Yundong laughed and said proudly, "We have Da Hong Pao, Tai Luohan, White Cockscomb, Water Gold Turtle, and Wui Cinnamon here. These are all oolong teas. Which one do you want?" Lu Fair opened her mouth and said in surprise, "You have Wui Da Hong Pao here? This is good tea." Li Yundong glanced at Ziyuan and said with a smile, "This is all her credit. I don't dare to take credit for it." Lu Fair rolled her eyes and said seriously, "Well, I want to drink the oolong tea in the market." Li Yundong's smile froze and he thought to himself, "This girl is playing with me." Chow Kefi, who was standing to one side, smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Well, stop fooling around. Hurry up and tell us." Yin Mingfan also smiled and said, "Yes, it's not a good sign to not open for business on the first day." Lu Fair giggled and said, "Do you want to know why no one is coming?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Big star, don't keep us guessing." Lu Fair giggled and said, "Because you just said that there would be no guests, so now it has come true." Su Chan and the others immediately burst out laughing. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Am I such a jinx?" Su Chan giggled and said, "Yundong, who told you to say that I have a jinx?" The other little foxes also joined in. "That's right." Li Yundong was a little annoyed. Just as he was smiling bitterly, he heard an old woman's voice coming from the door. "Hey, it's really here. Has everyone left? Little magic doctor, I'm late. I'm sorry." Li Yundong looked back and saw an old lady standing at the door. She was wearing a blue cotton padded jacket with a white bottom and a pair of black cloth shoes. The old lady was hale and hearty, smiling and holding a gift basket in her hand. She was Old Lady Su, who Li Yundong had once cured her chronic illness and helped Li Yundong settle his appearance. Who else could it be? Li Yundong immediately smiled and said, "Oh, it's Old Lady Su. Please come in." Zhou Qin also welcomed Old Lady Su into the tea house with a smile and said, "Grandma Su, why did you only arrive in the afternoon?" Old Lady Su smiled and said, "Not at all. I came in the morning, but when I saw so many official cars parked here, and all of them were quite powerful, I didn't want to get involved. So I went back and thought I would come back in the afternoon." As she said this, Old Lady Su smiled at Li Yundong and said, "Little magic doctor, you really hide your strength well. I didn't know that you were such a powerful character. Even the #1 car of the provincial party committee is here. Amazing." Li Yundong pointed to Zhou Qin with a smile and said, "This is because of her. I don't have the ability to disturb such a great god." Old Lady Su took Zhou Qin's hand and said with a smile, "I knew that your daughter was not an ordinary person. She must be the daughter of a rich family. Her speech and behavior are different from ordinary people. Now it seems that she is indeed not ordinary, ha." Zhou Qin smiled and pulled Old Lady Su to sit down. She smiled and said, "Grandma Su, please sit. What tea would you like to drink?" Old Lady Su waved her hand and said with a smile, "I won't sit. I have to go to the opera later." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Old Lady Su, since you came in, let's have a drink. At least let me open my shop." After he said this, the people around him laughed softly. Old Lady Su asked curiously, "What's wrong? No one came to drink tea?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Yes, I don't know why." Old Lady Su slapped her thigh and said with a smile, "Don't you know why? Hey, your shop is too luxurious and classy. Moreover, with so many high-ranking officials and dignitaries coming in this morning, who would dare to come in? What's more?" Old Lady Su pointed from Zhou Qin to Su Chan, then to Zi Yuan one by one, and finally to Lu Feier, Feng Na, and the others. She said with a smile, "Look at your place. Who in this room is not a great beauty? Although your tea house is small, there are many immortals here. How dare ordinary people come in to drink tea?" Hearing this, Li Yundong said with a strange expression, "Nowadays, isn't there a beauty effect in eyeball economy? Why is it not good to have too many beautiful women?" Old Lady Su couldn't stop smiling. She said, "But you have too many. Let me count, 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, there are 18 beautiful women who are as beautiful as flowers and jade. With so many beautiful women, which ordinary person's legs won't tremble when they come in. They will think, my God, there are so many beautiful women. How much does it cost to have a cup of tea in this shop? I can't afford it, I definitely can't afford it." Old Lady Su's words dispelled all the doubts in Li Yundong's heart. He raised his head and laughed. He clapped his hands and said, "It's true that the onlookers see the game more clearly than the onlookers." Li Yundong smiled and said to Zi Yuan, "As a living immortal, you didn't expect things to be like this, did you?" Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Indeed, the older, the wiser." Old Lady Su smiled and said, "I won't sit. Little magic doctor, I wish you a lot of money and a prosperous business. I'll bring some friends to your place for tea some other day. You have to give me a discount." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, sure." Li Yundong sent Old Lady Su away with a smile. He turned around and thought for a moment, then simply waved his hand and said, "Forget it, let's not bother about it today. The opening ceremony is already lively enough. We can't expect to make a lot of money on the first day, right? Let's go. Let's call it a day." Lu Feier whispered to Chao Kefi, "How can he do business like this in the world? Call it a day in the afternoon?" Chao Kefi also smiled and said, "How can there be an actor like you in the world? You disappeared while acting?" Lu Feier said angrily, "Sister Chao, are you helping me or him?" Yin Mingfan, who had been silent all this time, suddenly smiled and said, "Of course, I value my lover more than my friend. Didn't you see that after she came she didn't even talk to me? She just stared at her dream lover?" Li Yundong looked at them with a strange expression. "Why do I feel that you are being sarcastic?" Ruan Hongling chuckled and said in a strange tone, "You have a guilty conscience." Li Yundong couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Su Chan, who was beside him, suddenly took his arm with a smile and said in a coquettish voice, "Yundong, I believe that you are innocent." Hearing this, Li Yundong's heart warmed. He smiled and said, "My girl is so obedient. Humph girl, I'll take you to eat and drink tonight. I won't take the others to play." As he said this, he held the little girl in his arms and walked out of the door. Ruan Hongling was stunned and quickly shouted, Hey, what about the store? Li Yundong didn't even look back. Do as you see fit. Ruan Hongling stamped her feet and said, D***, this person is so annoying. He's actually a hands-off shopkeeper. Sister Ziyuan, what should we do? Ziyuan smiled and turned to walk out the door leisurely. Do as you see fit. Ruan Hongling was dumbfounded. She looked at her Shiji and thought to herself, am I seeing things? When did Sister Ziyuan learn to be a rascal? Could it be that she is influenced by the company she keeps? She hurriedly chased after them, leaving the people of the Fox Zen school looking at each other in dismay. At this time Zhou Qing came back. She looked at Li Yundong's back and asked curiously, where are they going? At this time the little foxes and the 3 Sherbas were also enlightened and ran out one after another. Only Zhou Qing was left shouting in confusion, hey, where are you going? Hey, say something. Hey, you don't even want the store? Zhou Qing was so angry that she stamped her feet, quickly locked the door and quickly chased after them. After eating and drinking outside, the group finally returned home. After Li Yundong returned to his room, he meditated and cleared his mind for a while, then began to think about some of the things that had happened that day. What puzzled him the most was that when he and Zhang Ling were fighting in the air, why had they attracted the heavenly thunder? Logically speaking, there was no cloud in the sky at that time, so it shouldn't have attracted the heavenly thunder. Could it be that someone was coveting it? So who could it be? Moreover, if the heavenly thunder was attracted by someone, why didn't it strike at the beginning? Could it be a deterrent to make me and Zhang Ling stop? These questions came one after another, making Li Yundong feel as if he had fallen into a cloud of 800 miles. He sighed softly and said, yes, yes. While he was perplexed and confused, he heard someone knocking on his door. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, please come in. The door creaked and a woman came in. She was tall and beautiful. It was Zhuang Yiting, the 3rd Sherbua of the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong was stunned and asked curiously, 3rd Sherbua, what's the matter? Zhuang Yiting's face was surprisingly serious. She said, leader, I have something very important to tell you. Li Yundong smiled and said, what's so important that you can't tell me tomorrow? Zhuang Yiting shook her head and said, leader, I know who the traitor is in our Fox Zen school. Happy Year of the Rabbit, everyone, haha. Chapter 422. Go to watch net. Hearing Zhuang Yiting's words, Li Yundong was shocked. He immediately stood up, but soon sat down slowly and said calmly, oh? How do you know that there is a traitor in the Fox Zen school? Zhuang Yiting looked worried. She sighed softly and said, leader, do you think I can't see it? I actually heard what you whispered to Jinren Ziyuan in private. At that time I kept an eye on it, but I didn't dare to confirm it, so I didn't tell leader. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, do you know that Ziyuan and I are also suspecting you? Zhuang Yiting nodded and said, yes. That's why I have to prove my innocence. Li Yundong asked, how can you prove your innocence? Zhuang Yiting said in a low voice, leader, you just need to go to Chao Yi's room and you'll know. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He stood up and said in a low voice, what's wrong with Chao Yi's room? Take me there. Just as he was about to go out, he suddenly heard his cell phone ring loudly. Ever since Feng Na had mentioned him, Li Yundong had brought his cell phone with him again. He picked it up and saw that it was a call from Chao Kefi. Li Yundong felt a little strange. He pressed the answer button and immediately heard a woman shouting in panic, Li Yundong, is that Li Yundong? Li Yundong could hear that the woman's voice was so frightened that it was a little hoarse. He asked in a low voice, who are you? The woman shouted, I'm Lu Feier. Li Yundong, come and help me. Sister Chao has been killed. Li Yundong was shocked. He quickly asked, what's going on? Don't worry. What's the matter? Lu Feier choked with sobs and said, someone wants to kill Sister Chao. Come quickly. Sister Chao is dying. Li Yundong was about to ask for the room number when he heard the beeping sound of the phone being hung up. Li Yundong was shocked and couldn't care less about Zhuang Yiting. He hurried out of the room, went to the balcony and shouted to the balcony next to him, Ziyuan, Ziyuan. When Ziyuan heard the noise, she rushed over from the balcony and asked curiously, what happened? Why are you in such a hurry? Li Yundong said anxiously, someone wants to kill Chao Kefi. I'll go and have a look. Call everyone together and tell them not to move around. Ziyuan was shocked, but she quickly calmed down and nodded. Don't worry, I'll be here. Li Yundong nodded. He glanced at Zhuang Yiting and said, we'll talk about this when we get back. With that, he flew into the air and turned into a ray of green light, flying toward the Imperial Hotel. After Li Yundong left, Su Chan also came to the living room in her pajamas. She asked curiously, "Sister Ziyuan, what happened?" Ziyuan smiled faintly and said, "It's nothing. Li Yundong has something to do. Call everyone together first." Although Su Chan was puzzled, she still knocked on the door one by one and called everyone in the Fox Zen school. When she came to Chao Yi's room and knocked on the door for a while, there was no movement inside. Su Chan asked curiously, "Strange, is Chao Yi Sherbua not here?" Zhuang Yiting suddenly sneered and said, "It would be strange if she was here." Su Chan blinked and asked, "Zhuang Yiting Sherbua, how do you know that Chao Yi Sherbua is not here?" Zhuang Yiting snorted coldly and didn't say anything. Su Chan rolled her eyes. She thought for a moment and was about to knock on the door again, but as soon as she raised her hand, the door creaked open. Chao Yi, wearing a loose Taoist robe, came out and asked with a strange look on her face, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" Su Chan smiled and said, "Chao Yi Sherbua, you're here? Third Sherbua said you weren't here." Chao Yi quickly glanced at Zhuang Yiting and said with a smile, "Third Sherbua probably thought I went out." Su Chan smiled and said, "Where can you go so late?" Chao Yi smiled slightly and said, "By the way, it's so late. What's the matter?" Su Chan said, "Leader said that we should all stay in the living room together." Chao Yi asked curiously, "What happened?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "I don't know. I only heard him say that." Chao Yi nodded and said, "Since leader has instructed me, I will naturally do as he says." With that, she went downstairs with a smile. When Chao Yi passed by, Su Chan's nose suddenly twitched slightly and she sniffed. The little girl suddenly thought to herself, "Strange, why is there a smell of blood on 6th Sherbua?" The little girl felt strange in her heart and unconsciously chased after Chao Yi for 2 steps, trying to determine whether the smell was real or not. As soon as she chased after her, Chao Yi immediately turned around and looked at her suspiciously. "Chaner, what's wrong with you?" Su Chan was keenly aware of Chao Yi's abnormal sensitivity at this moment. She immediately smiled and said, "It's nothing. I'll go to the other side and call the other Shiji." As she said this, she quickly walked past Chao Yi. As she passed by, she sniffed again and smelled a faint smell of blood. Su Chan was extremely proud of her sense of smell. She knew that it was impossible for her to smell wrong twice in a row. She was shocked and thought to herself, where did the smell of blood on Chao Yi Sherbua come from? While Su Chan was making wild guesses, Li Yundong had already arrived at the Dihao Hotel. He didn't wait for him to get close to the hotel. Instead, he picked a place where there was no one around and landed. Then he rushed toward the entrance of the hotel. Along the way, Li Yundong was secretly anxious. He knew that Chao Kefi had done him a favor. It was somewhat unjustifiable that he had disappeared without saying a word. He felt a little guilty in his heart, so his pace became faster and faster. Gradually he was like a galloping horse. Especially when he was crossing the road, he didn't even look at the speeding cars on both sides. Like a spirit monkey, he jumped from one end of the road to the other in just a few leaps. Li Yundong jumped easily, but the drivers were unlucky. They saw a figure fly over their car with a few flashes. It was so agile that it didn't look like a human being. They were shocked and turned their heads to look at the person. In the blink of an eye, the road was filled with people chasing after him. After a while, the road was completely blocked. Li Yundong couldn't care less about the movement behind him. He dialed Chao Kefi's number to ask for the specific room number, while he rushed into the hotel quickly. The security guard in the hotel, who was wearing a white shirt and black trousers, saw Li Yundong's nervous expression and hurried footsteps. He was secretly suspicious. Immediately, one of them came up and asked, "Sir, please wait. Please show me your ID." Li Yundong held the phone in one hand and touched it with the other. He was immediately stunned and said, "I didn't bring it." The security guard said in a deep voice, "Then you can't go in." Li Yundong took the phone and said to the security guard, "Something happened to my friend. If you don't believe me, you can listen to it." The security guard looked at him suspiciously. He took the phone and listened for a while, but soon returned it to him and said, "It's busy." Li Yundong was anxious. "I just dialed it. What's going on?" "Hello, something happened to my friend." The security guard shook his head and said stubbornly, "No, you can't go in." Li Yundong was annoyed. Saving people is like putting out a fire. "Are you going to let me in or not?" The security guard sneered and said, "What happened?" "I'll go and save her. But you can't go in." Li Yundong said angrily, "If I knew where she was, I wouldn't talk nonsense with you." After that, he pushed the security guard and said angrily, "Get out of my way." Li Yundong's strength was actually comparable to that of an ordinary person. With his push, the security guard suddenly flew out. The security guards on both sides of the hall saw that the situation was not good. They immediately called the police, drew their batons and surrounded Li Yundong from all directions. Li Yundong snorted angrily and went straight to the front desk. On the way, the security guards who approached him raised their hands and flew out without saying a word. The guests in the hall saw that these powerful security guards were immediately thrown out as soon as they got close to Li Yundong. The farthest one flew more than 10 meters away as if he was on a plane. They were all stunned and stood where they were, dumbfounded. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, for fear that they would provoke this devil and make him come to them. That would be very bad. The lady at the front desk was desperately pressing the alarm bell under the counter with one hand and holding it tightly with the other. Her body kept shaking, but she still kept a strange professional smile on her face. Li Yundong rushed to the front desk and saw that the poor girl was so scared that she couldn't even stand steadily. He was stunned for a moment, but his expression soon eased a little. He asked in a low voice, "Is there a person named Chow Kefi staying in your hotel?" Seeing that Li Yundong's expression had eased, the lady at the front desk also subconsciously relaxed a little. She thought to herself, "This man is quite handsome, but I'm afraid he's here to seek revenge. He's not a good person." So she boldly shook her head and said, "No, no." Li Yundong suddenly became furious. "You didn't even check and you said no? What the hell? She just called and said that she was here. Hurry up and check. Tell me as soon as you find out." Li Yundong's roar made even cultivators have to be in awe, let alone this young and beautiful lady at the front desk. The lady at the front desk suddenly shivered all over, and her hands quickly flew over the keyboard. While she was searching, she saw a security guard behind Li Yundong boldly throw the electric baton in his hand at Li Yundong. Without looking back, Li Yundong grabbed the electric baton with his hand. As soon as he held the electric baton, the lady at the front desk and the security guard were overjoyed. They all knew that this electric baton could instantly release a high voltage of tens of thousands of volts, which could instantly make people tremble and lose their ability to move. But as soon as the smiles appeared on their faces, they suddenly froze. They saw Li Yundong holding the electric baton and staring at the security guard who had attacked him behind him. He didn't say a word, but he was not angry. The security guard was stunned for a moment. He thought that he had not pressed the switch, so he pressed the switch a few more times. He only heard the crackling sound of the electric baton, but Li Yundong did not move at all. He stared at him like an insulated stone man. Li Yundong was not in the mood to deal with these people. He suppressed his anger and shouted in a low voice, "Have you had enough?" The security guard immediately let go of the electric baton, raised his hands and looked at Li Yundong with fear as if he were looking at a devil. Li Yundong glared at him, slapped the baton on the front desk and shouted, "Have you found it?" At this time, the smile on the lady at the front desk had not faded. Her expression was scared, and her smile became uglier than crying. She said in fear, "In room 35. Without saying a word, Li Yundong turned his head and ran upstairs. No one in the hall dared to stop him. A group of people looked at his figure in a daze, motionless. After Li Yundong left, the lady at the front desk picked up the electric baton and looked at it curiously. She pressed the switch and saw that the electric baton was still crackling. She muttered to herself, "Impossible, why didn't the electric shock hit him? Could it be a low-quality product?" Several of the ladies at the front desk, who were also frightened, came to their senses and said angrily, "It must be a low-quality product. Otherwise, how could he be fine after touching it?" The lady at the front desk who had answered Li Yundong tentatively touched the security guard who was holding the counter with the electric baton. As soon as the security guard's hand came into contact with the electric spark, he was immediately electrocuted and fell to the ground. He looked like a lunatic, foaming at the corner of his mouth. At this time, the ladies at the front desk came to their senses. It turned out that it was not that the electric baton was useless, but that the guy just now was not a human at all. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.